Family trips would be more enjoyable without me, or so my mother-in-law seems to think. From the window of the speeding car, she looked at me with a mocking smile. This story begins on the first day of a family vacation with my husband's family. On the way to a luxury hotel, we stopped at a gas station. Then, suddenly, I was left behind, completely alone. I stood frozen, unsure of what to do. That moment is unforgettable. My name is Susan, and I'm 30 years old. I focus on housework and don't have a job outside the home. My husband, Thomas, works as a management consultant and is often away. Since I spend a lot of time alone, and Thomas has been paying all of my mother-in-law's living expenses since my father-in-law passed away, we decided to live with her. She was thrilled that her only son was moving back in, but she wasn't happy about me, his wife, coming too. I'm not glamorous or interested in designer brands. I do many household chores, so my hands are often rough, and I wear practical clothes that are easy to move in. To my mother-in-law, I was an embarrassing daughter-in-law she didn't want others to see. My mother-in-law, Linda, is obsessed with appearances and luxury brands. She spent all her inheritance and savings, but refuses to change her extravagant lifestyle. She constantly begs Thomas for more money, but he firmly says, "I'm giving you living expenses, not money for luxuries." Still, she never gives up and often causes problems. To make things worse, my sister-in-law, Jessica, lives nearby with her husband. Jessica has the same attitude as her mother and often makes hurtful remarks, like, "Thomas could do better than a plain woman like you." She comes to our house every day, demanding meals, baths, and drinks, but never offers to help or contribute money. "You're Thomas's wife, so it's your job to handle all the housework," she says. "You're not even good looking, so at least keep the house clean." She even tells Thomas that I don't understand luxury because I've always been poor. Yet, my mother-in-law claims to my husband that she does all the housework herself, and Jessica pretends we're good friends. I used to work in customer service, so I've been using those skills to avoid major conflicts with my mother-in-law and Jessica, but it's been a tough few years. My husband noticed everything, from me doing all the housework to my sister-in-law's awful behavior. However, he didn't confront them directly because I asked him not to. I wanted to avoid completely breaking ties with his family, no matter how badly they treated me. He respected my feelings, but often said, "You don't have to push yourself so hard. I'm okay with cutting ties and living separately." "Thank you," I'd reply, "but I want to try a little harder." I was even thinking of planning a family trip to improve our relationship. "What do you think?" "That sounds good," he said. "I can take time off next month, so let's do this year's trip." My husband and I have always enjoyed traveling together, even before we got married. Occasionally, we'd still take trips as a couple after moving in with my mother-in-law. But once my mother-in-law and sister-in-law found out we were staying at luxury hotels, they began insisting on coming along. "You two are so selfish. How can you go on luxurious trips without us?" they'd complain. "From now on, include us, and make sure it's extravagant." Because they wouldn't stop pestering us, I eventually told my husband we'd plan a trip for everyone. We booked a luxury hotel for the entire family, including my sister-in-law's husband. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law were thrilled about the idea. However, just before the trip, my husband's work schedule changed, and he couldn't join us. I considered postponing, but my mother-in-law had already bragged to the neighbors about bringing back fancy souvenirs. She insisted we couldn't cancel, and I reluctantly agreed to go without him. On the day of the trip, I packed all their luggage into the car's trunk. Since there was no space left, I had to keep my own travel bag inside the car. During the drive, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law sat in the back seat, making snide comments the entire time. I was already feeling fed up. As I drove, I glanced at the empty passenger seat where only my travel bag sat. Without my husband there, I started to feel uneasy. Even as I drove onto the highway, my mother-in-law's complaints didn't stop. "You're driving so slowly. Are you this careless because Thomas isn't here?" she snapped. "There was an accident today, so I'm being careful," I explained. "You're just good at making excuses," she retorted. "You probably deceived Thomas the same way." "I didn't deceive anyone," I replied, holding back frustration. "If only slow Susan weren't here, this trip would be more fun, right, Mom?" my sister-in-law added. "Yes, indeed," my mother-in-law agreed. Eventually, as we approached a gas station, my sister-in-law suggested, "Why not let Thomas drive the rest of the way? You must be tired, Susan." Having prepared their luggage and cleaned the house before our early departure, I was completely exhausted. Reluctantly, I agreed. Susan, could you buy drinks for everyone? My sister-in-law asked as I stepped out of the car. Strangely, my mother-in-law gave me a friendly smile, so different from her usual behavior. Sure, that's fine, I said, surprised by their sudden kindness. Maybe they want to improve our relationship, just like I do, I thought, feeling a bit relieved. But as I was about to walk away from the car, the engine roared to life. To my shock, my mother-in-law threw my luggage out of the car and yelled with a big smile, "Family trips are more enjoyable without the daughter-in-law, you're just in the way." I froze in disbelief as they drove off, leaving me and my travel bag behind. For a moment, I stood completely still, unable to process what had just happened. Her cruel words echoed in my mind. Finally, I realized no matter how much I tried to please my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, it was all for nothing. Feeling overwhelmed, I grabbed my travel bag, my vision blurred, and I could feel tears welling up. Startled, I ran to the restroom, covered my face with a hand towel, and broke down, crying uncontrollably. I don't remember how long I stayed there, crying, but eventually, I noticed a call on my phone. There was also a message from my husband. He had finished work early and was checking on how the trip with his mother and the others was going. As I read his message, my phone rang. It was Thomas. "Thomas, I'm alone at a highway gas station right now," I said, my voice trembling. What happened?" he asked, alarmed. "Thomas, I'm alone at a highway gas station right now," I said, my voice trembling. What happened?" he asked, alarmed. Hearing his concern, I couldn't hold back my tears and started crying again. He patiently listened as I explained everything without rushing me. "I'm really sorry that Mom and the others did this to you," he said softly. "I'll come pick you up right away. I'm so sorry this happened." "Why are you apologizing, Thomas?" I asked, my voice still shaky. "I just wanted to get along with your family, but I couldn't." He paused and then said, "I want you to tell me how you really feel. Do you still want to try and make things work with Mom and the others?" Right then, I realized the truth. "It's too difficult. I can't do it anymore," I admitted. "I see," he said. "I'm sorry for what my family did to you. I'll handle the separation and everything else with them. But are you okay with leaving things as they are? Your feelings, I mean?" "My feelings?" I asked, confused. "Yes, you've been holding back for my sake all this time, haven't you?" Thinking back, I realized he was right. I had been suppressing my anger and frustration toward his unreasonable mother and insensitive sister. Finally, I admitted, "Yes, I have, but I can't stand them anymore. I hate being around them." Saying that out loud felt unexpectedly liberating. I had been carrying that weight for so long. Thomas responded firmly, "You can do whatever you want from now on, Susan. I'll take care of everything else. No matter what happens, I won't let them hurt you again." His words gave me a sense of relief, and I made a resolution. I wouldn't tolerate their treatment of me anymore. A few hours later, Thomas arrived at the gas station to pick me up. Just being with him made me smile naturally. I realized how peaceful and happy I felt with him. Even though we were traveling the same distance as before, it was clear that we didn't need anyone else to enjoy our lives together. I couldn't help but grin a little, even though I felt bad for worrying my husband. Thanks to his thoughtful care, I was able to rest well after we got home. The next day, Thomas made a surprising suggestion. "I've narrowed down the options for our new home to places near Susan's parents' house," he said. "What? Why all of a sudden?" I asked, startled. "I want to make sure we're not bothered by Mom and the others anymore. Let's finish moving during the 3 days they're on their trip. Will it be too difficult for you, Susan?" Thomas, who was usually so careful and planned, was suddenly acting decisively. I could tell he was deeply upset, though he kept a gentle smile for me. "I'm all for moving. Let's get started right away," I agreed. Without wasting time, we quickly found a new home and a moving company. Everything went smoothly, and we moved out before the family returned from their trip. During this time, I received several smug emails from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. "We're having the best trip without you," one read. "The hotel is luxurious and amazing. Make sure it's at this level next time. Dinner was extravagant and delicious. It's even more fun without Susan's ugly face around. Traveling with just the family is so much more relaxing. The jacuzzi is incredible." Their excitement and gloating were obvious, but I just thought, enjoy it while you can. I was looking forward to what would happen next. As expected, at around 10 a.m., on their checkout day, my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. Susan, what's going on? She demanded. What do you mean? I replied calmly. They're saying the accommodation fee is $100,000 if you're not here. The price is completely different from what you told us, she shouted, panic in her voice. It's only natural that the regular accommodation fee applies, I explained to my mother-in-law. Since I'm not there, the special discount doesn't apply. What are you talking about? She demanded. That hotel is run by my relatives. That's why we were able to stay at a discounted rate, I replied calmly. What? We didn't know that, she exclaimed. Well, all the hotels we've stayed at on our trips were run by my relatives, which is why we always got a special rate. Thomas told me to keep it quiet because if Linda and the others found out, you'd demand to stay for free. What? Anyway, we can't pay $100,000. You have to do something. We're family, right? She begged. You said I wasn't family, remember? You enjoyed yourselves as a family, so please pay as a family. Goodbye, I said firmly and hung up. Ignoring her continued yelling, I felt a sense of relief. In the end, my mother-in-law and the others had to borrow money from shady sources to pay the hotel bill. When they returned, they discovered we had moved, and they couldn't get any more living expenses from us. This caused huge fights between them and my sister-in-law's family, eventually leading to her divorce. With no husband or income, my sister-in-law tried finding work in nightlife but struggled because of her bad reputation and personality. My mother-in-law, abandoned by everyone, even showed up at my husband's office, begging for help. She looked older than her age, her eyes hollow, her face haggard, and her clothes dirty. Crying in the company lobby, she pleaded to live with us. But my husband firmly refused. We're cutting ties, he declared. Left with no options, my mother-in-law ended up doing hard, low-paying jobs just to survive. Years have passed since then. My husband and I now have a lovely child and live a happy, peaceful life. We are even planning to stay at the luxury hotel we couldn't visit before, just the three of us as a family. The hotel owner's relative invited us, wanting to meet our child. We're really looking forward to it.
Hey, aren't you going to contribute more around the house? If you're going to be that kind of wife, maybe you should just leave. I sat there, stunned by my mother-in-law's harsh words. Her cold, intense gaze bore into me. Francisco has us, and we don't need you anymore. You always look tired and seem to accomplish nothing, chimed in my unhelpful sister-in-law with a dismissive tone. This is too much, Francisco. Don't you think your mother and sister are going overboard? I pleaded. I'm doing my best too. When I sought help from my husband, he responded with a demeaning attitude. I agree with my mother and sister, Francisco interjected. I'm busy with work, and it's becoming a problem if you don't help with the chores. Besides, my relationship with the new part-time girl is progressing, and you're just baggage. Can you quickly pack and live somewhere else? Shocked by Francisco's words, I glanced at the three of them. They all seemed to blame me. A surge of rage welled up in my chest. I took a deep breath, calmed myself, and said, I understand. I need some time. My in-laws, who had once relied on me, were now falling apart. My name is Michelle, and I'm 32 years old. I work diligently, both at my job and in household chores. While it's not uncommon for women to continue working after marriage, I truly love my job and strive to succeed in the company I joined right after college. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, my husband, Francisco, approached with a pleading look. Michelle, can you take care of this? He handed me a file crammed with receipts and bills. You should manage the cafe's finances properly. I smiled and responded, sorry, but I'm really bad at that. I met Francisco while he was working part-time at a cafe I frequented. After a few chats, we began dating and eventually talked about marriage. Now, Francisco owns the cafe, but despite his ability to run the business, he struggles with paperwork and always asks me to handle the accounting. As I sighed, my mother-in-law added, Michelle, I suddenly feel like eating Chinese food tonight. Could you rinse the rice well? Also, Mia and the kids are coming this weekend, so we need to plan their meals. Sure, I got it. I nodded to my mother-in-law's request and hurriedly left the house. Before marriage, I was excited about my new life with Francisco. However, he suggested, My mom's lonely by herself. Why don't we all live together in our big house? So now I reside with his mother. To put it lightly, she's not proficient in household chores. When we moved in, the house was a bit of a mess. After my father-in-law passed away, she started living on a pension, which she mostly spends on dining out or ordering food. Francisco seems to believe that housework is a woman's job, making it my full responsibility. Francisco's sister, Nia, occasionally brings her kids home, and each time she does, my to-do list grows. I can't help but think that yet another chaotic weekend is approaching. Weekends, which should be precious times for recovering from the usual exhaustion, turn into moments where my sister-in-law's children ask to play or complain about being hungry. I find myself not only preparing meals in the kitchen, but also entertaining the children. Then, my sister-in-law drops a bombshell. Michelle, I'm getting divorced, and we'll be moving back here with the kids next month. I'm surprised, and for a moment, I'm lost for words. Really? Do you have something to say? She asks. No, I was just thinking. It must have been hard. When are you moving? I want to move as soon as possible. Surprised that my sister-in-law and her children will be moving in, I hope that maybe she will help, and household chores will become more manageable. While we had a normal relationship, I anticipate that this change might bring us closer and result in her contributing to the chores. Despite my positive attitude, reality has other plans. Perhaps because she grew up with my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law appears to live a life devoid of housework. She spends most of her time lounging on the sofa, watching TV, and always has some snack with her. Observing her, I realize her neglect of housework might have contributed to her divorce. Now, with the added responsibility of preparing meals for her children and making lunches for kindergarten, my workload increases, and my free time diminishes. I had hoped for her assistance, but it's disappointing that it turns out to be a swing and a miss. Then, there comes a time when my work at the company suddenly becomes hectic. Every day, I start work early, do overtime, and return home exhausted to find the room overflowing with things, with no space to even walk. Seeing this scene each day, waves of fatigue wash over me. On top of that, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law complain, asking if dinner is ready yet or why I'm home so late. When I struggle to manage household chores, they coldly remark, Michelle, there's a mountain of laundry waiting. Don't slack off just because you're busy. I internally protest, Mother-in-law, I'm really trying my best. But before my sister-in-law can say anything, I frequently opted to keep my thoughts to myself. Michelle, are you standing up to your mother-in-law? That's a bit bold. But for the sake of the children, please try a little harder to make homemade meals, suggested my sister-in-law. I couldn't help but respond. If you have so much free time at home, why don't you help out once in a while? While doing household chores, I overheard Francisco's sister saying, haha, Francisco owns a store, so Michelle doesn't need to work, right? If that's the case, maybe you should try a little harder at home. Behind their words, I felt the mounting pressure that I should be doing more. That night, at the peak of my stress, I decided to speak my mind to Francisco. I've been so busy lately, and neither your mother nor your sister is helping out with household chores. It's really hard. Michelle, you're not speaking ill of our family, are you? Francisco's eyes sharpened a bit, and I braced myself. That's not what I mean, but it's hard for me to do everything by myself. If you helped out once in a while, things would be a little easier for me. I'm busy managing the store. It's different from a regular job. Housework is the wife's responsibility, right? Even though disappointed by his response, I sat and pondered. A good idea suddenly popped into my head, and I silently pumped my fist. I immediately grabbed my smartphone, opened my favorite online shop, and started adding necessary items to the cart. After completing the purchase, I went to bed satisfied. A few days later, my new electronic household appliances, which would become my lifelines, were delivered to our home. The latest washing machine, a cleaning robot that reaches every corner of the room, and a rice cooker that cooks delicious rice without much effort. Each of them was a savior, making my daily life just a little bit easier and more enjoyable. While setting up the new washing machine, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law suddenly appeared with surprised expressions. "Wait, Michelle, you got such a fancy washing machine, but the old one was still good, wasn't it?" Smiling gently, I replied, "The old one took a bit too long, and I heard this new one shortens the laundry time." Their gaze then shifted to the cleaning robot and the new kitchen appliances. "See, I've also upgraded these," I said, showing them off a bit. "All these things, cleaning robots and convenient cooking appliances." "Michelle, come over here for a moment," my mother-in-law said inside the room. Seeing the slightly surprised expressions of my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, I smirked to myself. Francisco sat next to me, and the four of us began our discussion. "Why did you buy so many things?" My mother-in-law raised her voice. "Do you really need all these new appliances? Isn't it just because you want to make things a bit easier?" she continued. "Well, I thought it would be nice if things around the house could run a bit more smoothly," I replied with a slightly troubled expression. But my mother-in-law chimed in. "Relying too much on machines, aren't we?" The sister-in-law waved her hand, but I responded, "The appliances we had can still be used. Francisco is working hard managing his store. Maybe you should be more frugal." Francisco nodded in agreement with his sister, and in a quiet voice I murmured, "Maybe you're right." There was a hint of anger in my mother-in-law's eyes, and I stumbled over my words. "Are you even considering our household?" "I really am, but I'm just a bit exhausted," I replied. My mother-in-law raised her voice, exclaiming, "Enough. I can't believe you're our daughter-in-law." My sister-in-law, with a disgusted look, added, "I'll watch over Francisco. We don't need someone like you here." When I looked at Francisco, he said coldly, "I understand what Mom and Sis are saying. It's a bit difficult to have a wife who doesn't do housework." Looking at Francisco's face, my heart felt heavy. He continued with a cold smile. "I have my own store, so I decide how to use my money. But being with someone who spends on anything and everything might be difficult." I was shaken by his words, but I looked into Francisco's eyes and counted to 10. He added with a hint of cruelty, "Also, I've noticed things have been going well with that new part-time girl. She's more attractive than you are now. Maybe it's time for you to pack up and find a new place to live." A fire of anger surged within me, though I didn't voice it. Taking a step back and calming myself, I replied after a deep breath, "All right. I'll look for a new home. That's better." "Finally, you understand. I'll feel much better without you around," he said smugly. Francisco signed the divorce papers that night, and I moved to a nearby weekly rental apartment with just the bare essentials and the divorce paper. No one tried to stop me when I left. Did they ever really care about me? After submitting the divorce papers at the city office, I found a stylish apartment to start fresh. During this time, an unexpected opportunity came my way. A promotion I had been putting off because of my family situation. I seized this chance and began working as a section manager. Every day, as I dedicated myself entirely to my job, I felt a renewed sense of accomplishment. In the midst of these busy days, my phone rang. The caller ID showed it was my former mother-in-law. I thought we had nothing to do with each other anymore, right? Without checking her message, I swiped to dismiss the call. My new life had begun, and I wouldn't look back at the past. A year flew by. One weekend, as I was relaxing in my room, listening to my favorite music, my phone rang again. To my surprise, it was my former mother-in-law. Wondering what she wanted after all this time, I picked up. "Hello, is something wrong, Michelle?" I finally got through. "I didn't think you would answer after so many calls." "Well, it's been a while. What's going on?" I asked. She hesitated for a moment and then asked, "How's your new life?" Despite her probing tone, I replied cheerfully, "It's great. I love my new apartment, and work is going smoothly. I even got promoted and am living freely." "That's good, Michelle. Can you come back home?" I was taken aback and blurted out, "Why?" we're struggling financially. I thought to myself, I knew it, and responded cautiously. Francisco's cafe only makes about $1,000 a month, right? If no one else in the family works, things could be tough. You knew about that? She asked. Yes, Francisco's cafe wasn't doing well. I was fully aware of its financial situation since I handled all the accounting. But he pretended to be the successful owner without understanding the real state of his business. It was almost laughable how oblivious he was. I handled all the finances and procurement, so of course. I sensed her shock. You knew and didn't tell us? We had no idea you were doing so well in such a big company, or that you were contributing so much to the household expenses. My former mother-in-law exclaimed. I admitted, yes, I contributed more than $3,000 every month. Thanks to that, you all managed. The truth was, I used my salary to bridge the gap in Francisco's business losses. He seemed completely unaware of the situation, and after I left, it seemed reality hit hard. Michelle, can you please come back? She asked. Curious, I inquired. So how's Francisco's cafe doing now? She sighed. We might have to close soon, and the part-time workers keep quitting. With an inward smirk, I commented on his slightly sloppy management style. It's hard to keep it going for long, isn't it? His little bit of pride doesn't help. Not doing proper work. I mean, how many women out there do you think would be willing to support a guy like that? My former mother-in-law was momentarily at a loss for words. I continued somewhat sarcastically. Wait, I'm a bit busy now. Since you left, the house is a mess. It's chaotic with things everywhere. Confused? I asked. Wait, what do you mean? She described the disarray of their home with belongings scattered everywhere, looking like a storeroom. Without anyone to cook, they were eating out, which was costing a lot. The washing machine broke down, and it seemed like there's no room in the budget to buy a new one. Actually, the appliances that you took back, I was really relying on them, my former mother-in-law admitted. Puzzled, I asked, Huh? Why is that? Those were for my convenience. Besides, I bought them myself, so it's okay for me to take them back, right? She reluctantly agreed, yeah, I guess so. But I never realized housework was this challenging. With a firm tone, my former mother-in-law added, with 3 adults in the house, how can it be that hard? What are Francisco and your daughter doing? A hint of fatigue could be heard in her voice. As for Francisco, his staff members have been quitting, and sales have plummeted. As soon as he found out, he became really downcast and has just been lazing around at home. But Francisco used to spend his money from the store without any restraint, right? On top of that, Mia doesn't help at all. She doesn't do anything around the house and even gets her allowance from me. To be honest, living on just my pension for the 3 of us is really hard, she continued. I responded with a hint of sarcasm. Ah, Mia once told me that I was unnecessary because she was there. My former mother-in-law desperately said, Michelle, we're really in trouble. Living on just my pension for the 3 of us is quite tough. I firmly stated, I have no intention of returning to that house. It must be hard living with all that baggage. She seemed to be at a loss for words. Seeing her like this made me feel a bit sorry for her. But as I was about to hang up, my former mother-in-law seemed eager to say something. Michelle, I'm really sorry. Can you reconsider? Her voice sounded a bit exhausted. I replied, I wonder if we can ever spend days together with smiles again. Ha! Was it that hard without me? I asked with a mix of surprise and calmness. After a short pause, my former mother-in-law took a deep breath. Yes, there's actually an issue with the property tax. We might have to let go of the house. I said, I see, but I really don't want to get involved anymore. Decide what you're going to do with your family. I hung up without waiting for her next words. After that, I set it up so I wouldn't receive any more calls from her. In my room, holding my favorite mug filled with aromatic coffee, I enjoyed my time alone, looking at the outside scenery. A smile spontaneously appeared on my face. A few months later, when I passed by the cafe where Francisco used to work, I noticed the place was now quiet and empty. Recalling its past liveliness, I felt a bit nostalgic. It seems they really closed the shop. While walking around the old town, I became curious about my former in-laws' house and saw a sold sign. Coincidentally, I bumped into an old neighbor in town. According to her, those three had quickly sold their house and moved to a small apartment nearby. In their new home, there were always loud arguments and even the smell of garbage. It seems the neighbors are quite bothered, and it has become a bit of local gossip. I thought, it must be tough for them, but with a bit of effort, life can change. I wondered why they don't try. As I gazed at the old house, these thoughts wandered in my mind. A lot has happened to me since then, but I'm living each day to the fullest. In fact, a handsome guy from my workplace confessed, saying, "I really admire your hardworking nature." Now we're enjoying our dates, and I'm really looking forward to what the future holds. If I get married again, I really want to be happy. I'm feeling very excited about it now. Now that the elderly patriarch has passed away, I find myself in the role of the eldest son, essentially the decision maker for the family. Allow me to make it clear, the entirety of the inheritance belongs to us. Mom and Nolan will receive nothing. Prepare yourselves for this, and I apologize for the inconvenience, but Ryan would likely prefer it this way. It's more fitting for Aaron, who consistently prioritized Ryan's well-being, to inherit everything, rather than it going to the useless Olivia and Nolan. Despite Ryan's declining health, Aaron and his wife, Grace, never bothered to visit him, despite numerous invitations. After the funeral, their sudden appearance shocked everyone as they made audacious claims about taking the entire inheritance. Nolan, the second son, was visibly upset, and rightfully so. We had always strived to do what was best for Ryan, and Aaron and Grace's unbelievable behavior was intolerable. While pondering this, Nolan finally spoke up, expressing his displeasure. The words he uttered turned Aaron and Grace pale. I am Olivia, a 71-year-old housewife, living with my husband and Nolan. Ryan, as the second son of a major corporation-owning family, did not take over as CEO, but still had substantial assets. Despite his wealth, Ryan was frugal, detesting wastefulness and encouraging savings. However, Aaron and Grace, who were extravagant and often spent recklessly, faced financial trouble and sought our help regularly. On one occasion, Aaron and Grace approached our home together. Nolan, avoiding them, had gone out. Ignoring our disapproval, Aaron addressed Ryan, saying, "Dad, we're struggling with our finances this month. Could you help us out a bit?" Ryan, frustrated with their reckless spending, frowned. Grace chimed in, attempting to persuade Ryan, "You know, we have Colton too. He's about to enter high school and wants to go to a prestigious private school. But private schools are expensive, right? Colton's your beloved grandson. Maybe you could help a little." Their audacious request, despite needing help, astounded us. However, due to Ryan's deep affection for Colton, he agreed to provide financial assistance, setting strict conditions to prevent wasteful spending and ensuring Colton wouldn't suffer. Aaron and Grace, aware of Ryan's soft spot for Colton, exploited it, using him as a reason to secure the financial support they sought. The same pattern repeated itself, with us reluctantly agreeing to give them money following Ryan's instructions. I transferred a reasonable sum to Aaron and Grace's account, hoping for a positive change in our lives. However, our efforts seemed futile. More misfortune struck when Ryan collapsed, prompting Nolan to call an ambulance. Ryan was diagnosed with advanced cancer, and the treatment offered no guarantees. Devastated by this news, we resolved to support Ryan until the end. I visited the hospital daily, while Nolan, despite working, spent his days off by Ryan's bedside. Yet despite his deteriorating condition, Aaron and his family never visited. Ryan grew increasingly weary and longed to see Colton, whom he adored. Unable to bear seeing Ryan so lonely, I contacted Aaron and Grace, requesting them to visit with Colton. However, they responded dismissively, stating it was a hassle and never showed up. Ryan's battle with cancer lasted about a year, taking a heavy toll on him. After a long struggle, Ryan passed away, leaving an indescribable void. Nolan supported me, even though he must have been hurting too. Despite being overwhelmed with grief, I couldn't help with the funeral arrangements. Aaron and Grace never offered assistance, remaining heartless even in the face of Ryan's death. Ryan's funeral, a quiet affair attended by close family and friends, saw no sign of Aaron and Grace. After the funeral, as Nolan and I placed flowers and sympathy cards on the altar, the doorbell rang. We exchanged glances, realizing it was Aaron and his family. Colton's presence, after such a long absence, felt strange. Aaron casually mentioned they couldn't make it to the funeral due to a family trip they had planned. Grace and Colton followed him into the living room, their audacity astonishing us. Apologetic words seemed insincere, and their lack of empathy hurt deeply. I was even more taken aback when Aaron uttered something unbelievable. "Now that the old man's gone, as the eldest, I'm pretty much in charge. Listen up, the entire inheritance is ours. Mom and Nolan get nothing, just so you know," he declared confidently. In disbelief, I blurted out, "Sorry about this, but Ryan would be happier this way. It's better for the inheritance to go to Aaron," who always considered Ryan first, than to useless Olivia and Nolan. Aaron and Grace's outrageous claims stunned me. After leaving everything to us and enjoying their easy life, they now showed up to claim Ryan's inheritance. I couldn't bear the thought of even a part of the inheritance ending up in Aaron and Grace's hands. While we were struggling with this dilemma, Nolan suddenly spoke up, flipping the situation. "I've been thinking, Colton doesn't really look like Aaron," Nolan stated. Everyone, including Aaron's family and myself, was shocked by this statement. "Now there's no time for this, Nolan. What are you saying? Colton is definitely Aaron's child. He just takes after me." Grace reacted strongly to Nolan's casual remark. Her face turned pale, as if a taboo subject had been broached. "Why are you so flustered?" "I just mentioned it casually because I was curious. Also, Colton doesn't seem to resemble Grace either, or is it just me?" Nolan suggested. As we took a closer look at Colton's face, he didn't seem to resemble Nolan or Grace, especially since Grace claimed he looks like me, which didn't seem quite right. Aaron, apparently thinking the same, turned pale and glared at Grace. "Are you accusing me of cheating? Could Colton not be my son?" Aaron said, grabbing Grace by the collar. Grace frantically denied it, saying, "No, that's not true." But her denial lacked credibility. The situation was escalating, and without intervention, it could spiral out of control. Eventually, Nolan stepped in, saying, "Calm down. It'll all be clear once we do the DNA test." We decided to conduct the test. Grace kept arguing, saying there's no need for that, and doubting our parental bond. Although Aaron complained about this, he seemed determined to take a DNA test with Colton in the near future, not swayed by Grace's words. For a few days, I had little contact with Aaron and Grace, mostly spending my time sorting through Ryan's belongings. Then, one day, the doorbell rang again. As Nolan and I wondered who it could be, Aaron entered the living room alone. It was unusual for him to visit our house by himself. I made coffee and offered him a seat. With a look of humiliation, Aaron placed a document on the table, the DNA test result. It stated that there was no paternal relationship between Colton and Aaron. In other words, Colton wasn't Aaron's child. "I've been deceived by Grace. Colton must be the child of her lover. She betrayed me," Aaron exclaimed, his face turning red with anger. While cheating is undoubtedly wrong, Aaron may deserve some sympathy for being deceived. However, I couldn't find it in me to sympathize with Aaron. We hadn't forgotten Aaron's past unreasonable behavior, and Grace's betrayal didn't justify taking Aaron's side. I wouldn't be satisfied until I thoroughly confronted Grace. Please help me. Your oldest son was deceived, and you must be upset too. We need to unite as a family now. Erin pleaded, taking her hands. Still, I couldn't bring myself to cooperate with Erin, and my feelings were cooling even more. Seeing this, Nolan spoke up. Sorry, but I can't support you, Erin. You betrayed Dad too. We haven't forgotten that Erin was one of those who abandoned Ryan. If he had supported Ryan, then maybe his loneliness would have been lessened. Thinking of this, I couldn't easily forgive Erin. That was a different time. I was trying to spend time with my family, but they're not our family anymore. Despite our reluctance, we agreed to call Grace. Since the decision to do the DNA test, Grace had been taking Colton out often, rarely coming home. Grace didn't show her face even when Erin contacted her, so I decided to contact her using Ryan's inheritance as a pretext. I wouldn't normally do this, nor did I want to, but I did because I have a secret plan, Nolan said soon after. The doorbell rang, and it seemed Grace and Colton had arrived. As I opened the door to let them in, Grace frowned at Erin's jacket hanging next to the door. You didn't tell me Erin was here. Did you deceive me, Olivia? Grace exclaimed, about to leave with Colton. If they left now, calling them under the guise of discussing the inheritance would be pointless. Just as I was wondering how to keep them, Nolan stepped forward. Wait, Grace, calm down. If you leave now, things might get worse. It's better to talk here where we can control Erin than alone. It's in your best interest. Certainly, if Grace and Erin were to talk alone, the outcome could be unpredictable. Erin might even become violent in his anger. In such cases, probably only Nolan could restrain him. Convinced by Nolan's reasoning, Grace and her family entered the house. As they passed through the living room door, Erin glared at them. In response, Nolan, urging calmness, said, "Settle down," and then seated everyone and served coffee. Grace and her family looked visibly uncomfortable, but we managed to calm the situation. At that time, I didn't understand why Nolan had chosen such a complicated approach. Why did he need to gather us all here? Wouldn't talking to them individually have worked? But later, thanks to a trump card Nolan revealed, it all became clear. I understood why he had gathered us in that place. The room fell silent, with both Erin and Grace seeming to gauge each other's reactions. Unable to bear the tension, Grace suddenly apologized, saying, "I'm so sorry. I never intended for this to happen. I was deceived too." Grace, in tears, recounted her story. Her affair had begun over a decade ago with a colleague from her workplace. At the time, she had already been in a relationship with him before meeting Erin. However, her lover was married with children. Grace claimed they drifted apart, and that's when she met Erin. Erin fell for her at first sight and passionately confessed his feelings. Grace, whose feelings for her lover were fading, started dating Erin and eventually married him. About a year later, Grace reconnected with her distant lover. She hadn't expected to meet him again as she had quit her job by then. Their rekindled romance led to Grace becoming enthralled once more, and that's when she became pregnant with Colton. However, around the same time, her lover moved away with his family, effectively abandoning Grace. She knew it was wrong not to tell Erin that Colton wasn't his child, but she didn't have the confidence to raise a child alone. So Grace lied that Colton was Erin's child and continued that lie. If he hadn't left, I would have been honest about the affair and that Colton wasn't Erin's child. It's all his fault. Grace continued crying. Colton was silent, shocked by the revelation. That doesn't excuse what you did. You betrayed me. You destroyed my happiness, Erin retorted. Grace's excuses seemed incoherent, and even Erin couldn't accept such explanations. The argument escalated into a fight, with Erin and Grace grabbing each other. As if to admonish Erin and Grace, Nolan clapped his hands, saying, "If you want to fight, go ahead. But I have something important to say too." Nolan's words immediately stopped their quarrel. The mention of the inheritance they were fixated on seemed enough to calm their anger. Seemingly agreeing to a truce, the two sat down. Seeing them seated, Nolan smiled with satisfaction and pulled out an envelope from his pocket. This is Dad's will. He had it written by a trustworthy lawyer during his time in the hospital. It clearly states how the inheritance is to be divided. I was unaware of the existence of a will. Probably Ryan had directly asked Nolan to arrange for a lawyer. Nolan opened the envelope and began to read the contents of the letter inside. What he read was astonishing. The inheritance would be divided, with half going to my wife Olivia and 1/4 each to my son Nolan and my grandson Colton. The atmosphere changed dramatically as Nolan read this line. Aaron turned pale, exclaiming, "That can't be right." He lunged at Nolan, snatching the will and reading it, his eyes widening to their limits. How can this be? Why is there nothing for me? As the eldest son, Aaron had always assumed with certainty that he would receive a larger share of the inheritance. Yet, hearing that he wasn't allocated even a small part, Aaron couldn't possibly accept it. Disheartened, he slumped to the ground, repeatedly reading the will, hoping for a different outcome. However, the content remained unchanged. Taking the will from Aaron, I reread it to confirm, and it seemed there was no mistake in what Nolan had read. Naturally, Aaron, you and your wife had received substantial support from Dad. Dad was well aware that all the money was being used for your frivolities. That's why he decided not to leave anything for you. Nolan spoke calmly. Ryan's secret trump card had indeed managed to plunge Aaron into despair. By the way, I've already informed your parents, as per Dad's instructions, that the portion of the inheritance going to Colton will be temporarily held by your parents. So it's better not to think you can misuse Colton's inheritance, Nolan continued. Aaron was left questioning how this could be. It seemed that Nolan and Ryan had carefully acted to prevent selfish wastage. In that case, surely the portion allocated to Colton would be used for his future. Ryan had been concerned about Colton until the end. The two issues that surrounded us, Grace's infidelity and Ryan's inheritance, were finally resolved. We no longer needed to devote time to Aaron and Grace. After the discussion, Aaron's family returned home, looking dejected. The next steps were for them to discuss among themselves. As expected, Aaron and Grace ended up divorcing. We who had heard Grace's confession that day became undeniable witnesses, and Aaron demanded substantial compensation from Grace. Further disputes arose over the custody of Colton, as both wanted sole custody, knowing that Colton would eventually secure the inheritance. Myself, Nolan, and Grace's parents intervened in the negotiations. Eventually, it was decided that Colton would stay with Grace's parents until he came of age. Once the divorce was finalized, Aaron started visiting our house frequently, saying, "Let's live together." Feeling unable to accept him as family after all that transpired, we moved out, almost fleeing from Aaron. We changed our contact details, making it unlikely for Aaron to reach us. Grace, for her part, seems to be having a tough time. From what I've heard, her parents are furious over the incident. They paid the compensation, but until she repays it in full, she's not even allowed to see Colton. Meanwhile, we are living a happy life, following Ryan's philosophy. We carefully save the inheritance we received and make sure not to squander it, even though we have money. Since then, Nolan has been working diligently and was recognized for his abilities. John from B asked him, "Why don't you come to work for our company?" So he changed jobs, and now he seems to be an executive at the company where John is the CEO. I still consider Colton my grandson despite everything that happened, so I asked Grace's parents if I could visit him. He recently got into his first choice high school, so we celebrated by going out for a delicious meal. The incident with Aaron and Grace remains a deep emotional scar, but it also taught us the importance of relationships. I will use this lesson to live my life going forward.
Ken smiled as he recalled, Your parents were always a handful." My mother-in-law nodded in agreement, adding with a faint smile, "Now that they're gone, I can say it. Growing up under such parents, it's no wonder you struggled with independence." She looked at me pointedly, her words cutting deep. "If I had raised you, Maya, you would have turned out respectable like Ken," she continued, her tone dripping with condescension. It had only been a week since my parents' tragic car accident, and I was too mentally and physically drained to argue. My parents were respectable people, and I wanted to defend them. I wanted to retort, "If your mother had raised me, I might have ended up with a despicable personality like your son." But the words wouldn't come. My body felt too heavy to move, my mind too exhausted to fight back. I was ashamed of my weakness, unable to protect my parents' honor even as they were insulted. Just as I was sinking into despair, Ella appeared, her voice sharp with anger. "You have no right to act superior," she snapped. "I know the truth." The shocking revelations she shared reignited a fire in my heart. I wouldn't allow any more insults to my parents. From that moment, my daughter and I began to fight back. I'm Maya, a 38-year-old homemaker. I married Ken because I got pregnant, and it's been 16 years since then. I live with our energetic daughter, Ella. I had to drop out of university due to health issues when I got pregnant, a decision I sometimes regretted. But seeing Ella healthy and thriving, I knew I made the right choice. I've poured all my love into her, and she respects me in return. She's a talented young woman, so much so that she earned a computer qualification in middle school and was even featured in the newspaper. I may not be tech-savvy, but I admire her dedication and hard work. She's bright, friendly, and has many friends. I'm truly proud of the wonderful person she's become. However, my relationship with Ken hasn't been as smooth. In the early days of our marriage, his words, "Your support is what keeps me going," captivated me. I dreamed of a bright future together, but the reality was far from that. During my pregnancy, I suffered from severe morning sickness and back pain, spending most of my time in bed. Even then, I can't forget his harsh words. "Aren't you even going to prepare dinner? Don't slack off on your housework," he scolded, showing no empathy for my condition. Even when I'm not feeling well, I work hard at the office every day. "I'm not slacking off like you," he'd say, making me anxious about our future. When Ella was born, Ken didn't even show up at the hospital, citing work as an excuse. I didn't see him until we were discharged. That was when my affection for him began to wane. Yet I didn't choose divorce, mainly for Ella's sake. I felt incapable of raising her alone, especially without the means to send her to a good private school. So I endured, even when Ken made irrational demands like, "I can't eat this awful food. Remake it immediately." I silently complied, striving to be the ideal wife. As I continued to obey without complaint, Ken grew more arrogant. By the time 10 years had passed, he no longer even called me by my name. It wasn't just him. My mother-in-law also tormented me. She'd visit when Ken wasn't around and harass me with cruel words. "Women with low education and no career like you aren't suitable for Ken. You probably only got married because you were young. Now that you're getting older, you'd better make an effort not to be abandoned." And all I could do was apologize. "I'll do my best," was always my response. But no matter how often I said it, it never seemed to make a difference. My mother-in-law would inspect the house with a critical eye, eventually pointing out some minuscule spot on the bookshelf. "Look, you haven't cleaned properly," she'd say. "If you're a housewife, it's only natural that there shouldn't be a speck of dust left." I wonder if low education also means low skills in housework. No matter how hard I worked, she always found something to criticize. There was only one time I couldn't hold back. I broke under the weight of my husband and mother-in-law's constant harsh words. "Ken, weren't you much kinder before we got married? Why did you become so cold?" Even after 10 years of marriage, I still couldn't understand why he had changed. For a decade, I'd been searching for answers, but I couldn't find any specific reason. If my husband's coldness was directed solely at me, I might have been able to endure it. But thinking about our daughter, I decided to confront him. "I understand work is tough, but I want you to make a little more time for Ella." His response, when he returned, was cruel. "Why should I bother with my daughter's mood? I'm already busy running the company I founded, unlike you, who have nothing to do all day." After shouting this, he quickly retreated to his room. If Ella had been his biological daughter, maybe he would have listened. That faint hope was shattered in an instant. Feeling at my limit, I decided to confide in my parents about everything that had happened. Their words were a relief I hadn't realized I needed. Why didn't you talk to us sooner? If it's about your livelihood, we'll support you. Divorce him quickly. For someone who had tried to overcome everything on my own, their support was incredibly reassuring. However, it didn't lead to a divorce. My husband, who had always been intimidating, suddenly showed an apologetic attitude in front of my parents. It was my fault. I deeply apologize, he repeated, tears streaming down his face. Perhaps he felt something in that moment, and my fundamentally kind parents were moved by his apparent remorse. In the end, we decided not to divorce. But that decision didn't solve the problem. As soon as we returned home, my husband's demeanor changed. He berated me with an angry voice. This isn't a joke. What's the matter with humiliating me like that? It's shameful to rely on your parents when you're an adult. If we divorce, our reputation in society will plummet. Can't you even understand such basic things? His shouting filled the room, and Ella watched us, her face expressionless. My days filled with anguish showed no signs of ending. 8 years later, my parents passed away in a car accident. The cause of the accident was mistakenly pressing the accelerator instead of the brake. I couldn't believe it had come to this. Devastated by the obituary, I barely had time to process my grief before I had to take on the responsibility of arranging my parents' funeral. As their only child, the weight of this duty fell entirely on me. My husband made it clear he had no intention of helping. This is your parents' funeral, so I won't help at all. You deal with everything on your own, he declared before heading off to work as usual. Despite his indifference, on the day of the funeral, he showed up in new clothes with a mournful expression, keeping his head down. I wasn't even allowed to buy new clothes, but it was obvious why he attended. He cared about appearances. His true motives became even clearer a week later, on a Sunday. My mother-in-law and husband came to the house, both wearing smug smiles, and delivered a statement that left me reeling. We always had trouble dealing with your parents, Ken said with a smile. But they're finally gone, he added, as my mother-in-law nodded in agreement. If you're raised by parents like that, you'll end up as someone who can't be independent, like Maya. If I had raised her, she would have become a fine person like Ken, she added. I was utterly exhausted, both from the shock of losing my parents and the strain of my marriage. These two delivered words that felt like a final blow. What had I ever done to deserve this? I wanted to scream at them, to tell them not to mess around, but I was too worn out, too shattered to respond. My mind and body were completely drained. All I could do was silently apologize to my parents, feeling like a failure as their daughter for not defending them against such insults. Just as I was sinking into despair, my daughter suddenly appeared. Her expression was defiant as she addressed my husband and mother-in-law. Who do you think you are? I know everything, she said, her words eliciting an irritated look from my husband. I'm not going to entertain nonsense. You should be studying your room or something, he snapped. Yeah, that's right. Ella needs to study so she doesn't turn out like her mom, my mother-in-law chimed in. But Ella remained silent in the face of their condescension, and then she dropped a bombshell. You think I don't know? I saw you tampering with Grandpa's car. I gasped in astonishment. Could it be true? Had they really tampered with the car? Was the accident deliberate? If that was the case, it was beyond outrageous. It was monstrous. I instinctively looked at the two of them, and they stared at Ella with pale faces. Ella, what are you saying? That your father tampered with the car? Don't talk nonsense, my husband yelled, his face drained of color, anger barely masking his fear. My mother-in-law's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but no words came out. Ella, unfazed by her father's shouting, met his anger head-on, raising her voice to match his. Nonsense. Then why don't you confirm it with your own eyes? With that, she pulled out her smartphone and played a saved video. The video began with a shot of my dad's car before it was wrecked, clearly showing it in their garage. After a few seconds, voices could be heard off-screen. All right, good thing we left the keys unlocked, said my husband's voice. How did you unlock the garage? Asked my mother-in-law. I went to apologize to my in-laws before, remember? I made a copy of the house key then, thinking I'd get it back to them someday. I knew Maya had the key, so I borrowed it while she was sleeping. Even though he was always so concerned about appearances, my husband had secretly copied a master key to my parents' house. My mother-in-law didn't condemn his wrongdoing. Instead, she praised him. Just like my son, how clever. But really, why is your wife so clueless? It's beyond comprehension, she said. I couldn't believe such despicable people were connected to me. It was enough to make my vision blur with anger. As I wondered how my daughter had managed to film such footage, the video continued, capturing their vile conversation. To be honest, I wanted to marry a more attractive woman, my husband admitted on the recording. But I was afraid of the trouble from rumors after dumping her, so I ended up getting married. My mother-in-law chuckled and added, "It might be true that even conceiving a child was part of her scheme with you. What a hopeless child she is." They hurled insults at me before turning on a flashlight and beginning to tamper with the car. After about 30 minutes, my husband stood up, wiping sweat from his brow and uttering decisive words. "All right, the setup is complete. I messed with the brakes, so there's bound to be an accident somewhere. My anger won't subside until someone gets seriously hurt." My mother-in-law agreed with a sinister satisfaction, saying, "Yes, make my son bow like that. Those people deserve to suffer." The video ended as they left the garage, acting as if nothing had happened. Ella looked at her father, her face filled with a sense of superiority. "How about it? Can you still call this a lie?" she asked, leaving my husband speechless. "Debbie, why would there be such a video?" he stammered, his confidence shattered. "I filmed it myself," Ella stated, her voice steady. "What he did to Grandpa's car and how he mocked Mom is unforgivable. He's truly the worst man, isn't he?" She sighed heavily, her frustration evident, then addressed them slowly. "Sharing the same blood as you is nothing but disgraceful. If only I had noticed that camera's existence a little sooner, this wouldn't have happened. Realizing it only after the funeral proves that surveillance cameras are useless." Ella's eyes narrowed as she looked at them coldly. "People like you should be arrested." The moment they heard the word arrested, their faces changed. "Arrested? Becoming a criminal? That's absurd. Hand over that phone," my husband shouted, lunging at our daughter. Instinctively, I stepped in and skillfully dodged him, knocking him to the floor. "Actually, our family runs self-defense classes. I used to attend before getting married, so I can easily subdue you when you attack without thinking." "You can't do that. That's violence. I'll sue you," my husband yelled. But the tension that had built up in me for years snapped, and I finally let my emotions take over. "Violence? Then what do you call what you just tried to do to Ella? I can't believe you tried to lay a hand on your own daughter." Perhaps surprised by my unexpected retaliation, he stumbled over his response. "And no, that's what you're doing is clearly voyeurism," he stammered, trying to regain control of the situation. Ella cut him off sharply. "I had Grandpa's permission. I wanted to test the new security camera system I built." He scoffed. There's no way Ella could build a system like that. But Ella, with abilities that seemed unlikely to have come from me, had received awards in programming. She was considered a prodigy, so much so that news crews had come to her school to interview her. "You didn't even know about the awards, did you?" she retorted, her voice dripping with contempt. "I earned awards for programming, yet I've had to endure being a failure of a parent," Ella said, her voice laced with contempt as she delivered the final blow. "Now you're going to get arrested, and you'll be a failure as a member of society too." She fixed her father with a cold gaze. "You call yourself elite, but you don't even know basic things that high schoolers do. Maybe your definition of elite is different, but to me it's just vanity." At last, my mother-in-law, who had been silent until now, finally raised her voice. "That's enough. I can't believe you'd refer to your own father like that. Maybe it's because you, Maya, are so violent that this child grew up to be violent too." I was speechless, utterly astonished. Had she already forgotten what happened earlier when her son tried to attack our daughter? Ella shot back, "Criminals should stay quiet. Breaking my smartphone is pointless. The data is in the cloud, so you can't erase it anyway." Impressed by my daughter's foresight, I watched as she continued. "Why suddenly talk about clouds?" she mocked. "I'm not talking about the sky. I'm talking about the internet. Elite people like you should understand, right? Especially after all the boasting you did to Mom." But both my husband and his mother remained silent, clearly unfamiliar with cloud computing. "Calling yourselves elite is just plain vanity," Ella continued. "What a pitiful family. Don't be ridiculous. Who do you think has been feeding you all this time? With whose money?" my husband retorted angrily. "It's not that she didn't work, but that she couldn't," Ella replied coolly. In fact, my husband had pressured me into being the housewife, insisting that a dual income would ruin his rich man image. He gradually stripped away what little independence I had. But today, those days end. Seeing my daughter bravely stand up, I realized I needed to do the same. Ella is right. I've stayed in this marriage for our daughter's sake, but being with someone like you is detrimental to her, I said firmly. Are you really asking for a divorce? How will a woman who's never worked survive without me? My husband shouted, his contemptuous attitude exposing how hollow his pride really was. I decided to shatter that inflated ego. Do you really think you can live without me? Who do you think irons your suits every day, cleans this comfortable house, prepares your favorite meals? I've done all that. Without me, do you think you can handle it all by yourself? Of course I can, he responded, though his voice wavered with uncertainty. Your voice seems shaky. Are you really confident? I pressed. Yeah, well, anyway, there's prison life waiting for you from now on, so there's no need to worry about that, Ella said with a smile. I almost laughed. That's a relief. Your life as an elite is over, and from now on, you won't have to worry about society's gaze. As he continued to speak, it seemed he reached a breaking point and suddenly screamed, breaking free from my grasp. This is no joke. There's no way I'm going to prison. If I just destroy the cameras, the evidence disappears, he yelled, rushing off and leaving his mother behind. But he tripped over my shoes and fell, flailing like a frog in the doorway. Seeing him in such a state, Ella calmly called the police. In the end, both my husband and his mother were taken away by the authorities. Subsequently, videos taken by my daughter and other evidence were discovered, leading to their arrest. Anger welled up within me as I thought about the truth behind my parents' deaths. The trial is still ongoing, but I hope they receive appropriate punishment. Furthermore, my husband's company went bankrupt immediately following his arrest, with lawsuits regarding unpaid wages piling up. It seems he was unpopular among his employees, often speaking condescendingly without offering much helpful advice. Their belief in their own superiority was just a misconception. Since then, my daughter and I have been living a peaceful life. Although there were concerns about finances, my parents left us an inheritance.
My upbringing took a sharp turn from the very beginning, as my parents, facing financial constraints and harboring disappointment over my gender, decided to put me up for adoption when I was just a child. Growing up in a modest household with two older sisters, life was far from idyllic. We resided in a quaint ancestral home in a small town, relying on the support of my grandparents' farm for a significant portion of our sustenance. My father, a truck driver, was often away, returning home every few days, while my mother worked as a waitress. Being the unplanned third child, I discovered the unwelcome circumstances of my arrival as I matured. My parents had initially contemplated getting rid of me, but medical concerns dissuaded them. Moreover, my mother's desire for another daughter led to disappointment when I, a boy, arrived. Growing up, my small-town existence became colored by the embarrassment of being dressed in my sister's discarded clothes, a consequence of my mother's practicality in reusing outfits. School became a challenging environment where I faced ridicule for wearing a girl's uniform and sporting long hair. Complaints only resulted in punishment from my mother. As I navigated childhood, I absorbed a constant stream of abuse and harsh words from my parents. My father's sporadic presence offered little solace, as he fluctuated between a neutral stance and moments of cruelty akin to my mother. My resentment grew as I realized my sisters consistently received the best while I got their leftovers. Rebellion became my coping mechanism, a response to the injustices I perceived. I wasn't a saintly child. I directed my frustration towards my parents, holding them responsible for my misery. Grounded and left to fend for myself, I faced the struggles of a 6-year-old grappling with an unjust reality. A pivotal moment occurred when severe bullying in the playground pushed me to the brink. Upon discovering my sister's new holiday clothes, I succumbed to a fit of frustration, cutting them into confetti. While I regret my actions, they stemmed from a place of pain rather than malice. Instead of understanding my turmoil, my parents deemed it a sin deserving the harshest punishment. They decided to put me up for adoption. Despite waiting for a month, no one stepped forward to take me in. The frustration that followed was directed at me, reinforcing the narrative of my perceived worthlessness. In the midst of it all, I overheard my mother expressing how unwanted I was, further deepening the wounds of rejection. I often find myself pondering the wish that I had undergone a gender check, a step that might have spared me from being brought into a world where my parents harbored such intense hatred for me. It's disheartening to bear the weight of their disdain, especially for a reason beyond my control. After a considerable period with no takers for my adoption, my parents began discussing the situation with friends and relatives. Dad happened to know someone in the neighboring town, a man running a food van with his wife. Though they were economically less fortunate than us, their desire for a child had remained unfulfilled for over a decade. Dad approached them, and without hesitation, they agreed to adopt me. The moment Dad broke this news to Mom and my sisters is etched in my memory. Their joy at the prospect of getting rid of me was palpable. Dad, however, provided a disclaimer about their financial limitations, suggesting that I might not be able to attend school. Mom, nonchalant, dismissed it, urging Dad to drop me off the next day. I stood at the corner, holding the curtain, torn between my disdain for my family and the fear and hurt of leaving them. Tears welled up, but I kept them silent. The excitement of my family overshadowed my presence. When Dad finally noticed my tears, he offered a comforting pat on my back, instructing me to pack my belongings as we would leave for my new family the next morning. Though my heart screamed, the cries went unnoticed. I packed, hoping my new family would be kinder. The next day, Dad drove me to the neighboring town. The emotions during that journey remain a blur, a numbness that enveloped me. My new family, indeed financially modest, had a tiny house with one room. They had converted a storehouse into my living space. It was small, but at least I had a room, a luxury I never enjoyed before. My belongings found a home in a tiny closet at the corner. My new parents, Mary and John, greeted me with warmth and affection, qualities unfamiliar to me, coming from a disturbed household. Doubts lingered, and I resisted getting attached, fearing another abandonment. It took months for me to realize that their love was genuine. Despite discontinuing school that year due to the mid-session move, they promised to enroll me the following year. Witnessing their relentless efforts to save money for my education endeared them to me. In time, I reciprocated their love. My adoption, initially viewed as a curse, turned out to be a blessing. My biological parents never reappeared, allowing me to embrace my true identity as a boy. Mary and John, diligent and hardworking, devoted 14 to 16 hours a day to their food truck, located just outside their modest apartment. During the times when John and Mary were engrossed in their work, I wasn't left to fend for myself. Through my bedroom window, I had a clear view of their activities. Gradually, I found myself spending my days on the food truck, lending a hand wherever I could. When I entered school, my focus shifted to studies, yet I continued aiding them with chores during my free moments. By the age of 10, I was assisting John at the cash counter, showcasing an early proficiency in calculations. Business and accounting became familiar territories for me. Post-high school, a burning desire to run their business full-time emerged within me. However, both John and Mary insisted that I complete my college education first. They generously funded my studies, recognizing the need for formal education. As they aged and grew frail, I yearned to assume their responsibilities as they had done for me. Still, they reassured me they could manage for a few more years and urged me to pursue higher education. My college focus was on business and accounting, driven by my ultimate aspiration to become an entrepreneur. Graduation day marked a pinnacle of joy, with John and Mary celebrating as if over the moon. Despite inviting my biological parents to the convocation, they failed to attend. Post-college, my eagerness to take over the food van and allow John and Mary to retire clashed with their plans for me. Accumulating substantial savings, they handed it over to me, encouraging me to start my own business. Overwhelmed by their gesture, I hesitated to blindly spend the money. Drawing upon my business acumen, I scouted for a struggling local eatery in a prime location. After numerous rejections, I secured a lease on a profit-sharing model. Starting from scratch, I revamped the place and menu to cater to the tastes of millennials and Gen Z. By providing exceptional services, sales soared, yielding a twofold profit on the initial investment within a year. 4 years into this venture, I now proudly oversee 3 successful cakes in town. I upgraded John and Mary to a better apartment while securing a modest place for myself. Despite urging them to retire the food truck for their happiness, they insisted on continuing. Leaving their house with a suitcase, I never envisioned myself as a college graduate. Yet here I am, running flourishing restaurant chains in town. Fast forward to last month, a routine day at work turned extraordinary when I spotted a familiar face at the cash counter of one of my restaurants. It felt like encountering a ghost. My biological father, absent for almost 2 decades. Despite the presence of customers, I said nothing, leading him to a quiet corner. His appearance stirred up the haunting memories of my tumultuous childhood. The detailed account of my past wouldn't have unfolded if my biological parents hadn't reappeared in my life. He expressed immense happiness and pride in witnessing my success, leaving me speechless and numb. According to him, he had met John, who shared the news of my prosperous venture while passing by. He mentioned plans to bring my mom over for the weekend. Uncertain of how to respond, I remained silent, and he departed shortly after. Later that day, I approached John, expressing my reluctance to meet my biological parents, who had disowned me for being a boy. I harbored memories of a distressing childhood and contemplated running away for the weekend. Mary insisted on forgiveness and moving forward, urging me to meet them. Reluctantly, I agreed, setting the condition that Mary and John be present during the encounter. On the arranged weekend, my biological parents arrived at John's house. Instead of an apology, they displayed no remorse, focusing on counting the favors they believed they had bestowed upon me. My mother asserted that I should be thankful for finding good parents in John and Mary, who had raised me to be successful. Despite my inner turmoil, Mary's reassuring hand gesture prompted me to diplomatically express gratitude for having them as my parents. The meeting felt awkward, leaving me unsettled. The next day, a call from my mother, whose voice I hadn't recognized in 2 decades, unveiled a demand for money. She explained their financial struggles, detailing Dad's job loss and her own challenges in securing employment as a 50-year-old waitress. Facing mounting pressure from friends to repay borrowed money, she sought $20,000 to cover essential expenses. Though I promised to consider it, doubts lingered about their sincerity. Despite my reservations and conflicted feelings, I eventually discussed the situation with Mary and John. While Mary expressed happiness at my willingness to help, she advised caution. John, sharing my concerns, feared potential emotional exploitation. After much contemplation, I decided to take a gamble and transfer the money to her account, hoping to assist my family in need. Contrary to my initial sense of accomplishment, a week later, my mother called again, leaving me with mixed feelings about their intentions and the financial help I provided. She expressed her gratitude for the assistance and then mentioned that my sisters were eager to meet me. In that moment, I sensed a genuine desire from my family to reconnect. Despite the wrongs my parents had committed during my childhood, I harbored no ill feelings towards my sisters. As a small child, I may have done some mischievous things, but as I grew up, I never held them responsible. I even entertained the thought that my parents might have let me go due to financial struggles rather than malice. When Mom suggested meeting on the upcoming Sunday and I offered to drive home, she proposed an alternative, meeting somewhere outside. I agreed without dwelling too much on it. After the call, a sense of uneasiness lingered. Why didn't she want me to visit home? Meeting family after so many years, wouldn't it be more natural to call them home instead of opting for a restaurant? Nevertheless, she sent me the details of the restaurant, and it turned out to be one of the fanciest in town. At that moment, my focus was on the fact that they didn't invite me home. I joined them at the restaurant, and the reunion with my sisters brought a momentary sense of happiness. However, when the menu arrived, they began ordering the priciest items, seeking the most expensive dishes. When my father remarked, "Order the most expensive one," my son is a big man now, it felt mean-spirited and wicked. As they indulged in the lavish feast, I found myself footing the bill, a situation that left me contemplating wild thoughts like ghosting them before settling it. However, that seemed too severe. I resolved not to fall into their emotional trap again, sitting coldly through the rest of the evening. They didn't seem to notice my detachment. As they left, there was no invitation to visit home. Instead, my elder and sister inquired about the next dining destination. I faked a smile, bid them goodbye, and returned home to share my experience with Mary. Mary, a kind and independent woman, found their behavior disturbing. She advised me not to be a fool, not to dwell on them, and to focus on my own life. I heeded her counsel, not responding to my sisters or mother when they called. After 2 months of silence, it appeared they got the hint that I didn't want them in my life. In the subsequent update, I acknowledged the support and shared my decision to stop responding to my sisters and biological parents, realizing they seemed interested only in money. However, after 5 months, my mother called again, attempting small talk that felt fake and insincere. When she eventually disclosed that my sisters had to drop out of college due to financial struggles and asked me to fund their education, I couldn't contain my frustration. Despite her plea for help, I remained firm in my decision to distance myself from their intentions. I was at work during that call and wanted to keep a clear head, so I decided to hang up. However, she persisted, calling again in the evening. Initially ignoring her calls, I realized that avoidance wasn't a solution. The next time she called, I answered. She immediately delved into discussing my sister's eagerness to rejoin college and inquired about my payment plan, whether in a lump sum or semester-wise. She suggested transferring the entire amount to her, and she would handle the tuition before each semester. I interrupted her, expressing my reluctance to make any payments. To her surprise, I firmly stated that I had no intention of contributing. She inquired about the refusal, suggesting installment payments, but I reiterated my stance, emphasizing that Since Michael and Sarah returned for a hometown childbirth, please leave. My mother-in-law stated in a chilly voice. Her eldest son and his wife are due in 3 days. Me leave? I asked, confused and stunned. Yes, we don't need another mother figure anymore. You've been redundant for a while now. Michael and his family will be living here, so make sure you're out by tomorrow, she continued. I knew I was never truly accepted into the family since the day I got married. Treated as a wife, never did I imagine they would tell me to leave. You barren failure, you were allowed to experience raising a child. Be grateful. We have no obligation to support you anymore. It seems like Simon is tired of you too. What's Simon to? I gulped down my saliva. If it's not a conspiracy between my mother-in-law and Michael, then I don't need to stand in ceremony with my husband anymore. Foolish to drive me out, but it was my mother-in-law who ignited this. What happens to this house now is none of my concern. May they face the reality they have ignored squarely. Personally, I'm Anna Thompson, 45 years old, living with my husband and mother-in-law in a popular area close to the station. The access to the city center is superb. When house hunting, my picky husband, recently promoted to a managerial position, insisted on a spacious apartment. The rent was steep, but the space and rooms made it worth the stretch. My husband, Simon, 8 years my senior, a divorce I met through a friend's introduction. Comforted by the enveloping kindness unique to an older man, we decided to get married after 2 years of dating. Even when I told him about my infertility due to past illness, his affection did not waver. Likewise, my feelings remained unchanged when I learned of the circumstances he carried. My husband had a son named Michael from his previous marriage. I'm truly sorry to ask you, who have never been married, to live with my parents and son. I won't make you suffer. I'll ensure you're happy. That was the promise he made to me. To prevent me from feeling suffocated, my husband suggested moving to a spacious apartment where I could have my own room. Michael, turning 10 this year, won't need much care with my mom around. You don't have to push yourself. After his divorce, my husband got help with childcare from his parents at their home. A few years later, Simon's father passed away in an accident, and it seems his mother took over as Michael's caretaker. From the first meeting, Michael wouldn't even make eye contact with me. I thought it might be his shy nature, approaching a difficult age, so I didn't worry. As long as they accepted me as a member of the household, I was content. My mother-in-law was a quiet and refined person. When I visited to formally introduce myself after our engagement, she treated me with such politeness that I thought we would get along fine living together. I'll continue to prepare the meals as I have been. Simon comes home late, so it's okay if we eat at different times, right, Anna? I'll leave the cleaning and laundry to you. All right, let's work well together. After getting married, I switched from a full-time employee at the pharmacy to a part-timer due to the division of household chores. I started work a bit later in the morning, so I wouldn't get home until nearly 8 p.m. Dinner was always ready when I arrived, making me feel good about living together. My mother-in-law and Michael usually had dinner before I got home, so I was always eating alone. Even after getting married, I sometimes felt a sense of, is this it? But I came to accept that this was our family style. From the beginning, my mother-in-law never really liked me and didn't consider me part of the family at all. Michael, the school's activity day is before summer, right? When is it? We're all going to see you. Sometime after getting married, I tried to break the ice with Michael, who still hadn't warmed up to me. No, as Michael faltered, my mother-in-law interjected, "We'll go there, just Simon and me. Anna, you don't need to worry about it." I misunderstood her words, thinking she was just being considerate. "I can get the day off work. Let's all go together." "You don't need that. You're Simon's wife. And mixed family has always been just Simon and me." I was quite shocked when I brought it up with my husband at night. He said, "Mom's been clinging to Michael. She probably thinks you're trying to take him away. I'll talk to her eventually." I began to join as a mother at the activity day, but Michael and I rarely spent any time together outside of school events. Sometimes I could tell Michael wanted to say something, but my mother-in-law always cut in between us. I later found out that she had been bad-mouthing me to Michael. Anna said she could be happy with Simon if Michael weren't around. She's a terrible person. Dad must be deceived by her too. If a boy in his formative years hears such things, it wouldn't be strange for him to distrust me. It was a sickening story, but at that time, I hadn't imagined that my mother-in-law could do such a thing. After graduating high school, Michael immediately moved in with his girlfriend and left home. As soon as he started college, a year after he started working, he married her without a ceremony. Once Michael moved out, my mother-in-law surprisingly stopped doing housework altogether. Instead, it seemed that picking on me had become her sole entertainment. She stopped cooking, which she used to do before, and now just sits at the dining table waiting for me to come home. Without a moment to sit down, I would stand in the kitchen and prepare dinner. You're really inefficient. At this rate, it'll take you all night. I was never good at cooking, partly because I had always relied on my mother-in-law to prepare the meals. Whenever I did manage to cook, she would taste each dish and invariably complain, "This tastes awful. I'm sorry, I'm trying my best." You're astonishingly tone-deaf when it comes to flavors, Anna. It's a good thing Michael never had to eat this. How terrible. If she thought so, she might as well make it herself. But it seemed she just wanted to complain to me. Not just about the meals, but she started nitpicking everything from the cleaning I never used to do to the laundry. Why are there so many wrinkles on the laundry? You have to vacuum every nook and cranny. You really can't do anything right. Didn't your family teach you anything? With that, my mother-in-law sighed while looking at me being belittled. Even about my family, I clenched my fists in frustration. I don't know how you won over Simon, but I can't see much charm in you as a woman. And she always concluded with the same line, "If you hadn't come, Michael would have never left." I understood that there was a gaping hole in her heart since Michael had left. Maybe it was what they call empty nest syndrome. If taking it out on me made her feel better, that's what I told myself to endure it. But her bullying took on new energy after a certain event. That event was the pregnancy announcement for Michael's wife, Sarah. The joy my mother-in-law exhibited was unlike anything I had seen before. It's Michael's baby. It's bound to be adorable. Yeah, he'll be my first grandchild. Watching the two of them rejoice, I was happy too. But my mother-in-law's excitement was beyond normal. Probably because Michael asked her, "Grandma, can Sarah have our baby at your place?" Sarah's family home is an hour away by plane, and since they have no one else to rely on here, they turn to us for help. Of course, my mother-in-law wouldn't dream of turning down Michael's request. The phone calls from Michael started to become frequent, and her excitement went through the roof. The next day after getting the news, she started preparing enthusiastically. From cleaning out Michael's room to preparing the bedding and making a list of baby items, it was like she had great-grandchild fever. Naturally, I had to get involved too. When I returned from work, Anna, I vacuumed Michael's room. So you need to wipe the floors and the windows and please wax them too. This weekend we're going to the department store to look at baby cribs. Cleaning and waxing at night was tough, especially after a long day at work. If I even thought about cutting corners, I'd be told to do it over again. Moreover, my mother-in-law started asking for money, and before I knew it, the house was overflowing with baby stuff. "Anna, I need you to withdraw some money tomorrow. There are things I want to get ready for the baby again. Isn't it wasteful to prepare so much when Sarah and Michael haven't even arrived? Shouldn't we wait and choose together with them?" I had wanted to meet my mother-in-law's requests, but I was troubled by the relentless spending. How can you be so cold? It's Simon's grandchild. Oh, that's right. You're not related to Michael by blood. You don't care, do you? That's not true. Please don't say that. I just thought Sarah might want to pick things out herself. When do you want to choose things for your own child? Perhaps because I was making a valid point, my mother-in-law glared at me sharply. I immediately thought I had gone too far, but it was too late. Without a word, my mother-in-law went back to her room looking upset. I did reflect on it, but I was also shocked to be spoken about in such a way, regarding Michael. The next morning, my mother-in-law didn't come out of her room, perhaps still angry. Simon had a 3-day business trip starting that day, so he just called out, "I'm leaving," through her door. Please don't throw cold water on Mom's great-grandchild fever. She hasn't been the same since Michael left. You were worried too, right? I was. But if we spend all our money like this, we'll have nothing left when Michael and Sarah arrive, right? Simon's face immediately turned sour. Are you saying my earnings are too low? That's not what I'm saying at all, Simon just said, "Fine," and left with a look of dissatisfaction. Discussions about money always end up like this. Since I'm the one managing our finances, I can't help but think ahead. Of course, there's a reason for that. We've been married for 13 years. Simon has provided me with a very comfortable life. Your part-time income is for you to enjoy. Simon had always told me so. I saved everything beyond what I needed for myself. Even though it's in my name, I consider it our shared property. But then Simon's company's performance declined, and over the last 5 years, his salary has dropped to 2/3 of what it was when we first got married. While there's uncertainty whether his company will last until his retirement, he doesn't seem to consider changing jobs. For appearances in front of my mother-in-law, my husband couldn't give up his title as a department head. Now I'm the one paying the rent, and he covers the living expenses. We've kept this from my mother-in-law to save my husband's face. That day, I left work a bit early to apologize to my mother-in-law. When I got home, she was already sitting at the dining table waiting for me. "I'm sorry about yesterday. I may have gone too far," I admitted, but my mother-in-law remained silent. Instead, she blindsided me with unexpected news. Michael and Sarah are returning for a hometown childbirth. Please vacate, my mother-in-law declared in a chilly tone. The eldest son and his wife were set to arrive in 3 days. Perplexed and stunned, I asked, "I have to leave." She affirmed, "Yes, we don't need another mother figure anymore. You've been redundant for a while. Michael and his family will be living here. Make sure you're out by tomorrow." The realization hit me hard. I had never truly been accepted into the family since the day I got married. I had always been treated as an outsider. The news of Michael's return for the birth made it clear. "You barren failure," my mother-in-law continued. "You are allowed to experience raising a child. Be grateful. We have no obligation to support you anymore. It seems like Simon is tired of you too. Maybe he's getting along well with a new girlfriend by now." Shocked, I gulped down my saliva, contemplating the possibility of my relationship with my husband growing distant. Could this be a trap I fell into, thinking my husband would never? I remembered that, up until a year ago, he never had overnight business trips. "All right, I'll eat out tonight," I said, grabbing my bag and leaving the house to walk aimlessly. I needed to calm my severely shaken heart. Worried about my husband, I tried calling his cell phone despite my mother-in-law's words. I still wanted to talk to him, but he didn't answer, no matter how many times I rang. I dialed his office, only to learn that he had taken a couple of days off. My mother-in-law's words began to ring more true. Could he really be on a trip with another woman? Dark thoughts crowded my mind, and I found myself overwhelmed with emotion, tears streaming down my face. Staggering along, I noticed the tavern behind the station, a place we used to frequent when we first moved here. "It's still here," I thought as I entered. "Welcome." The tavern owner's expression clouded briefly upon seeing me. Then he nodded in recognition. "Hey, long time no see. It's been about 8 years. I used to come here a lot with my husband," I said. "Yes, it's been a while." "I remember you," he replied. I couldn't help but smile, feeling a sense of relief. "Can I get a beer and a mixed plate of grilled chicken, please?" I asked. The owner, a man of few words as always, nodded. As I sipped the cold beer and savored the grilled chicken, Checking my phone, I noticed there were 13 missed calls, all from my mother-in-law. Not again. Just as this thought crossed my mind, my phone vibrated again. "Hello," I answered, and my mother-in-law shouted loudly, "Brittany, where is this month's $33,000 support money?" "What I'm talking about? The $3,000 for this month hasn't been transferred yet." Her voice dripped with anger, never considering our situation. My patience reached its limit. She never reflected on her words or actions, even in this state. It was time for the last resort. I told my mother-in-law on the other end of the phone, "Your son has passed away, so I can no longer provide support. I am Brittany Wagner, a 32-year-old part-time housewife working at a major financial company. I married about 2 years ago, meeting my husband Justin through a shared hobby. His kindness and wonderful smile captivated me, and after a year of dating, we got engaged. We believed we couldn't find better partners than each other. Everything went smoothly until we faced a problem: my mother-in-law. My father-in-law had passed away years ago, and with no siblings, the only family left was my mother-in-law. Trouble started when we visited her to announce our engagement. As I greeted her, Sandra, my mother-in-law, showed her displeasure. "Are you Justin's fiancé?" "Yes, I am. My name is Brittany Wagner." "Nice to meet you." You seem rather plain. I wonder what Justin sees in you." "It's curious." I couldn't tell if she was serious or joking. Shocked, I heard such words from the mother of the man I loved. Seeing my distress, Justin looked displeased with his mother. "Wait, Mom, why would you say something like that all of a sudden? Why can you so casually say such awful things about the person I brought?" "It's different. I just want to choose the right woman for you. I brought her here because I decided to marry her. It's not up to you to comment on my choice, Justin. You don't have to be so cold. I'm just thinking about what's best for you." The argument between mother and son unfolded, creating a tense atmosphere. As it was my first meeting with my mother-in-law, I couldn't intervene. The uncomfortable air lingered even after the argument, but ultimately, we conveyed our intention to marry. As we left, Sandra spoke to Justin in a somewhat disgruntled tone. "Hey, Justin, you'll keep that promise even after we get married, right?" "Huh? What promise?" "You know about the promise of financial support." "Ah, that. I will continue to do it as always. Please don't bring this up in front of Brittany." The atmosphere between my husband and his mother had been tense for a while, making the air feel heavy. On the way back in the car, I asked Justin about something that had been on my mind. "Hey, Justin, about what you and your mother were discussing when we were leaving." "Ah, yeah. I suppose I should discuss something with you. I heard about financial support, and since my dad passed away, I've been sending money to my mom every month." "How much are you sending?" $2,000 each month." "What? $2,000? I raised my voice unconsciously, shocked by the amount. Justin sighed deeply and began to speak slowly. "Actually, my mom is in debt." "Debt?" "Yeah, she got into debt from gambling in the past. She's been paying it off and living on that, but her legs aren't in good shape anymore. So she spends more time at home now, and she still needs money to live, right?" "Well, yes, but I still think $2,000 is too much." "I know, but if I even slightly reduce the amount, she keeps calling me persistently." "Well, a parent is still a parent, you know? I worry about her since we can't live together." "I see. Justin is incredibly caring towards his mother, but it can't be helped. Since his father passed away, his mother is the only family he has left. No matter what her character is like, she's still an important mother to Justin. At that time, all I could think was what a kind person my husband was. Then, one day, 2 months after we got married, during my lunch break, I received a call on my smartphone. It was from my mother-in-law. "Hello?" "Yes," I answered, and she began speaking in a cheerful tone. "It's been a while, Brittany. I have something to discuss. Are you free now?" "Yes, I'm free. What's going on?" "Well, I was thinking maybe you could also start sending me some financial support." I was speechless at her unexpected request, But my mother-in-law continued happily. You mentioned you work at a financial company, right? So you must have a good salary. No, that's not the case. Are you trying to lie to me because you don't want to give me money? That's not what I'm saying. Then why not? But mother, Justin is still sending you money every month, isn't he? Yes, he is. She didn't seem to appreciate the support she was already receiving. I spoke up firmly. Please listen calmly, mother-in-law. Continuing to send as much as $2,000 a month is a really big deal, you know? And yet, you still want more. I can't understand that. Oh, is that so? You say that. But if you could just contribute the remaining $1,000, Justin wouldn't be burdened. What do you mean by that? I have Justin as a co-signer on my debt, which means if I default on my payments, the creditors will come after him. Do you understand what I'm saying? What? But wasn't the $2,000 Justin sends used for paying off the debt? Well, the thing is, it's not enough. I haven't told Justin yet, but the debt is quite substantial. It seemed from the way my mother-in-law spoke that this was a truth unknown to my husband. If we were to have children in the future, it would inevitably mean more expenses. On top of that, paying off my mother-in-law's debt wouldn't be easy. However, if her repayments fell behind by the time the debt transferred to Justin, the interest would likely have ballooned significantly. It was easy to foresee that refusing to help now would ultimately burden my husband. Realizing that, the best course might be to ensure she pays off her debt completely. I hesitantly conveyed to my mother-in-law, "I understood. I'll contribute to the support as well." Really, Brittany? You're amazing. I knew you would say that. Combined with Justin's, it'll be $3,000 a month. This will be used to properly pay off the debt, right? Of course. I plan to pay off the entire amount in about a year. Please promise to pay it off without any delay. Okay, I understand. It's a promise. So I'll be expecting the support starting from this month, my mother-in-law said, unilaterally ending the call. The stress piled onto my exhausted body, and I felt increasingly depressed. $1,000 every month, that's a significant burden, but it's necessary to prevent future troubles for us as a couple. And if my mother-in-law can't live properly, Justin wouldn't like that either. That evening, I promptly reported this to my husband. He said, "You shouldn't have to go through all this trouble." But I had already agreed with my mother-in-law. I explained it was a tough decision made to avoid future burdens on us. With a look of regret, my husband said, "I'm really sorry, but thank you," showing understanding for my decision. Time passed, and 2 years have gone by since this decision. The support, which was supposed to end in a year, is still ongoing, and we continue to transfer $3,000 to my mother-in-law every month. To complicate matters, my husband fell ill about 2 months ago and has been unable to work. He's on sick leave and receiving a small amount of sickness allowance, but it's minuscule compared to his usual salary. Last month, I used my savings to send the $3,000 to my mother-in-law. But if this continues, even our living expenses will become difficult. Incredibly, my mother-in-law hasn't once visited Justin in the hospital. I informed her a long time ago about his hospitalization, but instead of visiting, she only contacts me to ensure the continuation of the support. Frustrated by her behavior, I finally brought up the subject with my husband. "Justin, your mother only talks about money. Even knowing you're hospitalized, we need to seriously consider whether to continue the support." "Yeah, I've been thinking the same. I don't want to burden Brittany any further. She's been calling and messaging this month asking, is the support coming?" Seriously, even though her own son is in the hospital, all she thinks about is money. Justin, looking somewhat gaunt, expressed his anger towards his mother. Then, with a sudden idea, he said, "Ah, I've got it," and smiled. "What is it, Justin?" "Well, I just thought of something. It's a last resort, though. Something good." "About my mother?" "Huh, what?" My husband proposed an unexpected plan. It might seem excessive, but it seemed the only way to get through to my mother-in-law in her current state. A few weeks later, Justin was discharged from the hospital, fortunately in good health. Since there was no response from my mother-in-law despite numerous attempts to contact her, we hadn't informed her of my husband's discharge date. For the past 2 weeks or so, she had been incessantly demanding financial support. There's no need to purposely send money to a mother who doesn't even worry about her son. My husband remarked while having coffee. As we relaxed, a message came to my smartphone. On closer inspection, there were 13 missed calls from my mother-in-law. Not again. As my phone vibrated again, it was another call from my mother-in-law. I deliberately turned on the speaker so that my husband could hear, and my mother-in-law immediately started shouting. "Brittany, where's this month's $3,000 support?" "What I'm talking about, the $3,000 for this month hasn't been transferred yet." "Mother, please calm down. Do you realize right now Justin is? I don't care if he's sick or whatever. You work at a good company. You must have plenty of savings. Hurry up and transfer it to me." My mother-in-law furiously shouted, eventually saying something unbelievable. "Do you get it? You married Justin and became his wife, so when Justin can't pay because he's sick, you should pay me. If you don't, I'll make you the co-signer of the debt." At that moment, something inside me snapped. She always exposed her greed, never considering our situation. My patience with her had reached its limit. Doesn't she reflect on her words or actions even in this situation? If that's the case, I have no choice but to play my last card. I firmly told my mother-in-law over the phone, "Your son has passed away, so I can no longer provide support." My mother-in-law responded with a dumbfounded, "Ha." Justin's proposed last resort was to lie to my mother-in-law that my husband had died and see her reaction. If she showed even a hint of sadness, reflected on her past behavior, and sincerely apologized, then I would consider continuing the support. But if she showed no remorse and still demanded money, I was ready to completely sever ties. I thought even a mother obsessed with money would deeply reflect upon hearing about her son's death. However, the moment she heard it, my mother-in-law started laughing loudly. "Ha ha ha, what's so funny? Because if Justin is dead, that means I'll get a share of the inheritance, right? I've been researching it, you know. I started looking into it as soon as I heard Justin got sick. You're entitled to 2/3 of Justin's estate, and the remaining 1/3 is mine." I was dumbfounded. Normally, if one hears their child is sick, they would first look for treatment or useful information. But she had been researching inheritance division. My anger reached its limit, and I was beyond appalled. My husband seemed to feel the same way, and we exchanged glances before he slowly nodded. It was a sign to continue with the plan. Once again, I spoke firmly to my mother-in-law. "Mother, did you listen to what I said? Your son Justin has passed away." "I've heard you, so what? Aren't you sad your son has died before you?" "Oh, right. I was worried I wouldn't get the monthly support anymore. But well, if I'm getting the inheritance, that's fine. How can you, for now, just make sure you give me 1/3 of the inheritance, okay? If you try to run off with it all by yourself, I'll never forgive you." The call ended abruptly, and the dial tone echoed in my ears. Casually glancing at my husband, I saw his face turn red with anger, his body shaking. "Justin, calm down. Are you okay?" As I casually asked my husband, he looked me straight in the eyes and said, "I've decided I should cut ties with such a person. She will surely come here demanding money eventually, so let's wait until then." "Yeah, you're right, Justin. Are you really okay with this, cutting ties with your mother like this?" "Yeah, I am. After hearing what she said on the phone, I have no regrets. Someone who can say such things without batting an eye is not a parent." His eyes were filled with hatred, turning red. I felt the same way. A person who thinks only about money, even over her son's life, is not family. A few days later, as expected, my mother-in-law showed up at our house. I managed the situation for the time being and asked Justin to hide in the next room. Then, my mother-in-law approached me with a fierce look and pressed me aggressively. "Brittany, hand over Justin's inheritance right now. Huh, that topic again? Don't you have anything else to say? Justin's dead, isn't he? What's the point of saying anything now? It's meaningless. You have the nerve to say that when you didn't even visit him in the hospital. Can you even call yourself his parent? You're so noisy. Just give me the inheritance right now. I'll call a lawyer if I have to. At that moment, I realized that talking to her was just a waste of time. Just then, my husband emerged from the next room. Seeing him, my mother-in-law let out a loud gasp as if she'd seen a ghost. Justin, why? You're supposed to be dead. Mom, long time no see. Sorry, but the story about me being dead was a lie. A lie, you say? Why would you say such a disrespectful thing? To expose your true nature and confirm it for myself. I wondered how you would manage the monthly financial support if I, your son, were dead. But unfortunately, you turned out to be the worst kind of person, only thinking about money. This situation made that very clear. That's Justin, calling your own parents the worst kind of person. Quiet? I'm cutting ties with a toxic parent like you. As my husband shouted, Sandra stood there open-mouthed, stunned. She hadn't yet come to terms with the reality of being disowned by her own son. Wait, what do you mean, Justin? Well, I just said, I'm cutting ties. I can't consider someone like you my mother. Don't say that. So, what about the financial support? Why would I support you? You need to find a way to pay off your own debt. We've decided to move away. Wait, without the support, I won't be able to live. Tears in her eyes, my mother-in-law reached out to my husband. He forcefully brushed her hand away, looked at her coldly, and said, I don't care about your life. You never once apologized for all the trouble you caused us, did you? Knowing your true nature now, I feel relieved. Don't ever show your face to us again. That's cruel. Wait, Justin, are you really going to abandon your mother? Ignoring her words, my husband grabbed her arm and dragged her to the front door. Then, he threw her bag and shoes outside and kicked her out of the house. She made a scene outside, but apparently unable to bear the stares of onlookers, she left after a while. Persistent calls and emails came, but we ignored them all. We blocked her number and quickly finished moving. The co-signing of the debt turned out to be something Sandra had fabricated, so the guarantee contract was void, and Justin no longer had any responsibility as a guarantor. Having lost all support from us, my mother-in-law was apparently living a miserable life. It was no surprise since she had used almost all the money we sent for gambling. The remaining debt was substantial, and she spent her days being chased by debt collectors. Working from morning till night, she couldn't gamble anymore. It's unlikely that she will pay off all her debt anytime soon. From now on, she will have to work until her body can no longer move. It's all her own doing. Meanwhile, we are living fulfilling days in our new home. Justin's condition stabilized, and he was able to return to work after recovering. And now there's a new life growing inside me. Next year, our family will grow by one, and we will start a new life. In the future, we want to spend peaceful and happy days as a family of 3.
My name is Mary. I turned 35 this year on a warm summer day when birds were chirping happily. One day, I was asked to go to the president's office. The president is actually my mom. I'd accidentally called her mom instead of boss because I was surprised. She seemed annoyed by the heat and didn't even look at me when she spoke. She said she's giving the company to my sister and firing me. It was hard to believe what I heard because the sun was so bright. I probably looked really shocked. My mom, looking frustrated, finally looked at me and repeated that I'm fired because she doesn't want me around since I'm not as attractive as my sister. She said I had to leave by the end of the month. Then she went back to her work as if our conversation was over. I felt confused and hurt as I sat there, listening to the birds outside. My mom even scolded me for still being there and told me to go back to work. I walked away from the office feeling like a robot, saying excuse me as I left and closing the door behind me. Our company is pretty small, just a 2-story building, and we're in the demolition business with about 10 people working here. It's a family business, with my mom as the president, my aunt and her husband as the top managers, and my mom's cousins as other important managers, but my mom always had the most control. After I finished high school, I got a job at an accounting firm. But when I turned 25, my mom said we needed an accountant at our family business. She basically guilted me into joining, saying I shouldn't abandon my family. And when I started, I didn't just do accounting work. My mom gave me all sorts of jobs, from paperwork to sales, whenever we were short-staffed. Basically, I did a bit of everything at the company. Even though the work was tough, I tried my best not to be a burden to anyone. I worked long hours and somehow managed to keep up with everything for the past 10 years. On the other hand, my sister Lucy, who was supposed to take over the company, is 3 years younger than me at 32, and she only started working here 2 years ago. Lucy had been jumping from one job to another, always saying they weren't right for her. When she turned 30, she stopped looking for work and spent her days relaxing at home. Then, my mom decided Lucy should work at our family business and made her an executive director. Even though I've been working at the company for 10 years, I'm still just a regular employee. Everyone noticed how differently my sister and I were treated, but I wasn't surprised. My mom has always liked Lucy more, even when we were kids. She gave Lucy all the nice clothes and toys she wanted and always said how cute she was. But I got hand-me-downs and wasn't paid much attention to. As a child, I didn't understand why my mom treated us differently. I worked hard in school and helped out at home, hoping to get her attention. But even when I got top grades, she barely noticed. At one point, I even thought about getting plastic surgery because I believed that if I looked prettier, my mom would pay more attention to me. But my aunt, who is my mom's sister, saw me feeling this way and explained why my mom ignored me so much. When I was in high school, I was told that my dad had died. But the truth was, when Lucy was born, my dad left my mom for another woman from his job. This woman was older than my mom and supposedly not as pretty, but she had a similar vibe to me. My aunt told me that my mom was too proud to admit that my dad left her for someone who wasn't as attractive as she was. She seemed kind of satisfied telling me this, like she enjoyed seeing my mom in a tough spot. My aunt wasn't particularly stunning herself. She took more after our side of the family, but she was good at her job and often used her charm to get ahead. My mom took over the family business when she was 32, after my dad left. She used her looks to attract and keep lots of clients, which really helped the business grow. Plus, there was a lot of demand for demolition work at that time because many buildings needed tearing down. So my aunt's family and my cousins couldn't really stand up to my mom. Lately, the cost of getting rid of industrial waste and moving it around has gone up, and it's been hard to balance how much it costs to demolish buildings with what we actually make. Our company isn't the only one struggling. The whole industry is having a tough time. It's been a challenge just to pay our employees every month. And now, my younger sister has joined the company as an executive director, adding to the mix. I wondered how my mom planned to pay my sister's salary, but she just said, "We'll cut your pay to cover hers. We're family, so it's natural, right?" I pointed out that even if they cut my pay, it wouldn't be enough to give my sister the salary of an executive director. But my mom didn't care. She told me it was my problem to figure out. I timidly suggested that maybe my sister should start as a regular employee. My mom gave me a harsh look and scolded me, saying, "Who do you think you're talking to? This isn't your business to interfere with." At that time, we all lived together. My sister didn't contribute anything to the household, while I paid $1,500 each month to help out. I've been helping around the house since I was young to support my busy mom, but my sister never did anything, acting like it was normal. "Hey sis, is dinner ready yet?" Lucy would ask when I was working late. When I told her to make her own food because I was busy, she'd say, "But I don't know what to cook. You're the one who knows the kitchen best, right?" I don't want to get in trouble for using it without asking like last time. She never bothered to try cooking. Instead, she used that past argument as an excuse to avoid doing anything around the house. So, I often had to rush home to cook dinner before going back to work. My mom usually didn't cook either. Even when I made meals, she'd often eat out, choosing whatever she wanted. Lately though, she was going out to eat with Lucy more, so I didn't have to cook as often. But now, we were spending more money on entertainment, which was causing new problems. My mom, who was now 63, was starting to complain more about feeling sore and the effects of drinking too much. It was around this time that I was called into the CEO's office and told, "I'm giving the company to Lucy. You, who aren't as pretty, are fired." I could understand why my mom chose Lucy to take over the company, considering her past behavior. Lucy was 32, the same age my mom was when she became the CEO. Maybe my mom thought Lucy could use her looks to get things done, just like she did. But I couldn't accept being fired because of how I look. Even if my salary went to Lucy, it didn't seem fair. When I talked to my aunt about it, she already knew Lucy was going to be the CEO, but she didn't know I was getting fired. After thinking about it, my aunt said, "I'm not sure, but it seems like Lucy doesn't like that whenever she says she'll do something at the company. Everyone says it's okay because they know Mary will help. Maybe that's part of the reason." No, it's because everyone stopped asking Lucy for help since she always does a messy job, right? Lucy was really bad at her job. She often missed deadlines, messed up phone calls, and made lots of mistakes in her work. Even though she had some experience, she didn't seem to realize how bad she was. Maybe because people always overlooked her mistakes because she was pretty, she never thought about improving. My aunt agreed, saying, "That's true. But I think Lucy sees you as a bother." She added sadly, "But I never imagined they'd fire you. Without you, the company won't be able to work properly." She seemed worried, but didn't argue with my mom because she knew she wouldn't win. I felt disgusted knowing my aunt was related to me by blood. "So basically, both my mom and sister hate me, right?" I said bitterly. My aunt didn't know what to say, so she suggested, "Well, your mom is terrible, but maybe you'd be better off working somewhere else with all your skills. It's a waste to stay here." Standing in the car, bathed in the red glow of the summer evening, I stared into the distance and felt a sense of relief. Maybe it was okay to let go. I turned to my aunt and said, "You're right," with a big smile on my face. It was the first time I'd smiled genuinely since I started working at the company. My aunt looked a bit confused by my smile, but she returned a sad smile. As I worked on handing over documents and organizing files so that anyone could understand them, the end of the month came quickly. When I went to the CEO's office to resign on time, the sound of birds was gone, and my mom and sister were happily chatting. "That sales guy definitely has a crush on you." "You, that bald guy?" "No way." They laughed loudly, not realizing I was there. When I cleared my throat, they finally noticed me. My sister looked at me curiously and said, "What's up?" "We don't need dinner tonight. I'm quitting today." "Thanks for everything," I told them. "Oh, was it today?" "I forgot." My sister laughed again. I felt relieved knowing I wouldn't have to see them anymore. "I'm moving out too, so take care," my mom replied mechanically with no emotion. I closed the door, and from inside, I heard my sister say, "Now we won't have to deal with that annoying face anymore." In my heart, I whispered, "Just you wait," and left the company I'd been at for so long. A week later, after finishing some paperwork for school, I checked my phone and saw 14 missed calls from my mom in just 2 hours. I didn't call her back because I had a bad feeling about it. I put my phone on silent and went home after finishing my other tasks. The missed calls from my mom kept piling up, and when I checked the next morning, there were a total of 80 missed calls. The last one was after 2 a.m. But I didn't even consider calling her back. She was like a stranger to me now, and I didn't want to hear her voice at all. I even had thoughts that if I heard her voice, I might end up doing what she wanted. After all, she had controlled me for 35 years. So I ignored her calls with all my strength, trying to break free from her influence. I could have blocked her number, but I thought keeping the calls might be evidence of her behavior if something happened. At first, getting almost 100 calls a day was tough, and I hated seeing them come in. But over time, I started feeling satisfied, imagining my mom's frustration with each unanswered call. It made me realize just how badly she had treated me. The year went by like this, and eventually the calls from my mom stopped. I had no idea what was going on with her. During this time, I worked part-time while studying online to become a tax professional, and I passed all the exams. I recently got a job at a top tax consulting firm. My experience in the very tasks I did at my mom's company helped me see the bigger picture, which was a big advantage in my new job. I was grateful for all the hard work I'd done at my old company over the past 10 years, especially now. The people at my new job are great, and we all work together well. It's a big change from my old job. When I was left to figure things out on my own, Pushed around by my mom and sister, I spent countless nights researching and working alone. One day, while I was leading a fulfilling life, I had to visit a client near my mom's company. As I passed by, I noticed the windows were dirty and the plants I used to care for were withered. On my way back, I bumped into my mom coming out of her company. When she saw me, she shouted, "Ah," and rushed towards me. Expecting her to scold me, I instinctively covered my face with my bag. But to my surprise, she spoke to me in a sweet tone, asking where I'd been and if I changed my phone. It seemed like she hadn't even considered that I might not want to talk to her because I disliked her. Given everything she'd done to me, I couldn't help but wonder about her thought process. Ignoring my confusion, she continued, "Oh, but it's a good thing I saw you. Look at the state of this company. It's awful, isn't it? You can start working here again from tomorrow. I'm not mad, you know. So I forgive you for leaving a year ago. Please come back to work tomorrow." It took me a moment to process what my mom had just said. Did she only see me as a little child who adored her? Mom, I'm already working at another company, and I'm happy there," I said hesitantly. But instead of understanding, her face twisted into anger, and she yelled, "What? You're telling me you're working somewhere else while our company is struggling? I don't care about other companies, you belong to me, got it?" Causing a scene in the street. "Wait a minute, you're the one who fired me, remember? What about Lucy? What happened to her?" I asked. My mom snorted and said, "Oh, Lucy. I thought she'd be useful, but she got caught having affairs with 3 men from our main client. Our business with them ended quickly. I tried putting her in clerical work, but she couldn't even clean properly and was useless at accounting. Because of her, we couldn't even hire someone else." After venting her frustrations, my mom turned to me with a grin. "That's why it's your turn, Mary. Ever since you left, the office has been a mess. I need you to take responsibility." I had made a thorough handover manual before leaving and explained everything to Lucy. But I doubted Lucy had even looked at it, and I was sure my mom hadn't heard anything about it either. And even if she did, she'd probably pretend to forget. I couldn't understand why they fired me and then expected me to clean up their mess. This was typical of these women. They acted tough, blamed others, and made others clean up after them. It was their usual trick. I bit my lip, thinking of the kind people I worked with now, and I swore to myself that I wouldn't succumb to this pressure anymore. "You're the one who fired me, right?" I said to my mom, my tone changing. "And you fired me because I'm not pretty, isn't that right?" A crowd had gathered around us, intrigued by our argument. My mom seemed startled by my sudden assertiveness. "Did I say that? Are you sure you didn't misunderstand?" she stammered, aware of the onlookers. "No, I heard it loud and clear. You're giving the company to my beautiful sister and firing me, the ugly one," I declared boldly. "I don't get it. I've been working hard at the company for 10 years, but you suddenly decide to give the company to my sister, who hardly does any work, after just 2 years. Your judgment is questionable," I stated firmly. The crowd started to murmur in response. "Can that really happen? That's not fair. Are they even related? Is she her own mother?" Some even started filming us, but I was too angry to care. As my mom began to sweat and pale under the accusing stares, she panicked. "Mary, you're misunderstanding. Let's go inside," she urged. "Misunderstanding? What's there to misunderstand? If you didn't say it, just say it clearly," I retorted. When my mom stayed silent, the people around us started saying, "She's silent, so it must be true. That's unbelievable." Then something snapped in my mom. She started yelling, "Shut up. It's all your fault for being ugly and miserable. Ugly people should know their place and obey what beautiful people say. That's all you're good for." People around us were shocked by my mom's outrageous behavior and quickly started uploading their videos. The headlines read, "Ugly woman obeys beautiful woman." The video went viral, reaching my mom's clients, who promptly cut ties with her. It turned out that in the year after I left the company, they were involved in shady activities like fraud and tampering with accounting books. When the video spread, everyone was eager to distance themselves. As a result, the company went bankrupt. My mom and sister, now without income, came to my apartment, but I didn't let them in. In the end, they moved to a rundown apartment without a bath, living in fear of creditors. My sister, always trying to take it easy by flirting with male coworkers, had trouble keeping part-time jobs because her coworkers didn't like her. Meanwhile, everyone knew about the viral video, So my mom was also shunned by her coworkers. It seems she's now silently working by herself. Meanwhile, I found a boyfriend at my new workplace. He's not conventionally handsome, but he appreciates.
My name is Amy, and I'm 31 years old. I've been married to my husband, Scene, for 3 years, but we still don't have any children. We had envisioned owning a home and starting a family by now, but that dream seems to be slipping away. I've started to believe that Scene and his parents are contributing to our current situation. Despite our efforts to save money together, our savings haven't grown much. Scene often buys expensive branded gifts for his parents, and this habit has been a strain on our finances. Before we married, I knew Scene had a tradition of giving gifts to his parents, which I initially saw as a sign of respect. However, my perspective has shifted since we've been married. While his filial piety is admirable, his tendency to spend money recklessly has become more apparent. He seems to view our increased income as a green light for more extravagant spending. Where he used to stick to a budget, he now chooses only luxury items, and his parents have come to expect these costly gifts. They even request them for no particular reason, which I find difficult to understand. Scene has been secretly giving gifts to his parents, and discovering this has only fueled my growing resentment. While he shows unwavering dedication to his parents, he remains indifferent to mine. When I bring up my mother's upcoming birthday, his nonchalant response only adds to my frustration. The stark contrast between the gifts he lavishes on his parents and the modest ones I can afford for mine bothers me deeply. I sometimes wish I could give my parents expensive gifts, but our finances are stretched thin due to his spending. As a result, the gifts I manage to give them are always a compromise, falling short of what I'd like to offer. Although my parents appreciate what they receive, it pains me that I can't fully celebrate their special occasions. My dissatisfaction with Scene's one-sided concern for his parents is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. After a year of marriage, as I watched our savings stagnate, I began addressing Scene's spending habits. However, each time we discussed it, the conversation ended in his anger. He would accuse me of lacking sympathy for his parents or even of disliking them without truly hearing my concerns. Despite my repeated attempts to communicate, he never genuinely listened or showed any willingness to change. A few months ago, Scene bought his mother an expensive new wallet. When I confronted him about it, he defended the purchase by claiming her old wallet was worn out. But I knew the old wallet was one he had given her just a year earlier, and it didn't look worn to me. Realizing that my words weren't getting through to him, I decided to approach his parents directly. Considering our future, I felt it was crucial to address the issue directly with Scene's parents. With Scene present, I began by showing them the balance of our joint account. I pointed out how little our savings had grown since we got married, despite both of us working. As you can see, I said, we've hardly increased our savings since we began, even though we both contribute to the household income. My in-laws examined the bank statement with unreadable expressions while Scene appeared visibly displeased. Undeterred, I turned to him and asked Scene, "Do you remember the promise we made when we got married? We agreed to save money to build the house and start a family, right?" He seemed to have a moment of realization and nodded, looking guilty. To get to the bottom of the issue, I pressed Scene further. "Then why aren't you cooperating? Are you saying you don't want to build a house or have children?" He shook his head vigorously, clearly disagreeing with that notion. Just as I was about to continue, my mother-in-law interrupted. "Oh, so we're talking about building a house now. That sounds wonderful. I'd like our room to be in a sunny spot." My father-in-law quickly added, "Yes, we definitely need more space for our things. 2 rooms would be ideal." I was taken aback by this unexpected response. Seizing the moment, Scene became enthusiastic about the idea. "All right, then let's make it 2 rooms, one for visits and another for storing clothes and belongings." Annoyed by their enthusiasm, I cut in, "If we're adding 2 more rooms, that will increase our costs significantly. Therefore, we'll need to avoid any expensive gifts until the loan is paid off." My mother-in-law quickly backpedaled. "Oh, it was just a joke. We rarely stay over at Scene's place anyway, right?" My father-in-law chimed in, Exactly. Maintaining the smile, I firmly reiterated a decision I had made previously. I see it was a joke. However, for the sake of our future household and children, we'll need to limit gifts to birthdays and anniversaries only. Scene immediately protested, "That's not fair to Mom and Dad." I had anticipated his reaction and responded with a look of disdain. "Then your pocket money will be entirely cut off. We can't find any other way to tighten our budget. Or are you planning to use the money you saved when you were single to cover your parents' gifts? If that's the case, I won't interfere." Scene fell silent, his face sour. I let out a soft sigh, and with a bright smile directed at my in-laws who were searching for a response, said, "I appreciate your understanding, as saving requires the effort of the entire family." They responded with reluctant nods, their faces still grim. It was clear that none of them, including Scene, were fully convinced, but I firmly closed the conversation, leaving no room for further discussion. After that discussion, Scene stopped giving extravagant gifts to his parents, and I noticed our joint bank account balance steadily increasing. I felt a sense of relief as our finances began to improve. However, this tranquility was short-lived. The turning point came when my sister gave birth. Being only a year younger, my sister and I have always been very close. Although our contact lessened after marriage, we still made an effort to keep in touch at least once a week. When she had the baby, she sent me a photo along with news of her joy and excitement. Perhaps I am biased because it's my niece, but the baby was truly adorable. I couldn't contain my excitement and immediately showed Scene the photo of the baby. His eyes softened as he was charmed by the baby's cuteness. I felt a wave of relief at his reaction. Although he had always said he liked children, I had my doubts about whether he truly meant it. I worried that his reluctance to save money was due to a lack of interest in having children. But from his reaction, it seemed he would cherish our future children as well. Feeling reassured, I remembered something and said to Scene, who was still admiring the photo, "I've already sent my sister a gift and some money for the baby." His expression immediately darkened and he glared at me with clear dissatisfaction. "You restrict gifts to my parents but spend so much on your sister," he said, clearly upset. As I stood there in shock, he continued to complain, "And you sent it without discussing it with me." His self-righteousness made me lose my temper, and I responded sharply, "How can you say that when you always secretly give gifts to your parents? This is for a baby's celebration, not for no reason at all. If you can't accept that, then let's agree to stop giving gifts entirely." I worried that I had overstepped, but the words were out, and I couldn't backtrack. Perhaps the idea of being forbidden from giving gifts was too much for him to accept, but he didn't argue further and fell silent. His face remained displeased, but I took it as a sign that he had reluctantly agreed. A few days after our argument, I received a call from my mother-in-law. As soon as I answered, she started with, "I heard your sister had a baby." Realizing my husband had shared this news, I confirmed, "Yes, that's right." I expected her to offer congratulations or chat about the baby, but instead, she asked, "So, I heard you gave her a present. Is that true?" Taken aback by her directness, I replied, "Yes, I sent something for the baby." To my surprise, she responded cheerfully, "Well, I hope you'll have something for our anniversary next week too. I'm looking forward to it." Her request felt a bit impolite, but it was better than having Scene make an expensive purchase on his own. I agreed and ended the call. For my in-laws' anniversary, I decided to send a practical pair of glasses. I braced myself for a complaint, but none came, and time went by without incident. I had been too quick to judge my in-laws, but recent events made me realize my mistake. One day, my mother-in-law visited our home with a brand new luxury bag, beaming with delight. She admired the bag and thanked me, saying, "Thank you for the $4,000 bag." I was stunned, believing that our anniversary gift was merely a pair of glasses. I complained to Scene, "I feel awful about this." My shock left me barely able to whisper, but I chose not to address it with her at the time. She seemed oblivious to my reaction and cheerfully mentioned she was heading out to lunch with friends. After she left, I rushed to the bank. We had 3 accounts, individual accounts from before our marriage and a joint account we opened after tying the knot. The joint account showed no significant withdrawals, but checking our personal accounts revealed that $800 had been withdrawn from Scene's account and $4,000 from mine. When my husband came home, I confronted him about the missing money, but he dismissed my concerns. I thought it would be unfilial to give just glasses for the anniversary, so I used my account to cover Dad and yours to cover Mom, he explained. Seeing my anger, he grew flustered and insisted it wasn't a big deal since he hadn't touched the joint account. As I remained silent, his frustration mounted. Why would you only get glasses for the anniversary? I went out of my way to make sure both of them were covered, he argued. Realizing the conversation was going nowhere, I grabbed the carry bag I had packed earlier and quickly left the house. I could hear him shouting behind me, but I ignored it and walked away. When I arrived at my parents' house, they greeted me at the door, clearly surprised by my sudden return. My intention to divorce left them even more shocked as I hadn't mentioned anything about it before. It must have come as a surprise. I explained the deep differences in values and thinking between my husband, his parents, and myself, detailing the recent incident with the luxury bag. I shared how my fear of my assets being misused led me to decide on divorce. My parents listened, understood, and supported my decision. Since I had already prepared for the divorce, filing the petition and arranging for a lawyer was straightforward. Once I confirmed that the affidavit had likely reached him, my husband began trying to contact me repeatedly. His voicemails filled up with messages, which I initially listened to. However, as his messages grew increasingly angry, I stopped listening and chose not to respond. The divorce proceedings with my husband went much smoother than I had anticipated, thanks to my thorough preparations. Since we worked in different departments of the same company, news of our divorce spread quickly. Although he attempted to claim that I left of my own accord, his lies were quickly disproven. I had already informed my boss and colleagues about my intention to divorce, along with the reasons and the issues with my husband and his family. Despite any false information he might have spread, my boss and colleagues, who knew the real story, promptly refuted it. My husband only made things worse for himself by propagating falsehoods. He faced cold stares from colleagues and was pressured by his boss to resolve the matter quickly. Given his naturally timid nature, it seemed he couldn't handle the pressure. Under increasing pressure, he agreed to the divorce. Unable to handle the hostile environment at work, he resigned and moved back in with his parents. However, things didn't improve there. Rumors about him and his parents had spread beyond the office, reaching our relatives as well, thanks to a family member who worked at the company. The reception was icy. Returning to his parents' home only further damaged his reputation. The neighborhood viewed him as someone who had been abandoned by his wife, and his parents, known for flaunting their luxury and looking down on others, only worsened the situation. Although the exact source of the leaks was unclear, the rumors circulated quickly. Facing disapproval and cold stares from those around them, my ex-husband and his parents lost their former arrogance and became notably subdued. Their once beloved collection of luxury goods came to an end when my ex-husband lost his income, forcing them to sell off their possessions. A relative who used to work with us informed me that the relationship between my ex-husband and his parents had become frosty, filled with mutual blame. I felt indifferent to this news. They had become irrelevant to me after our separation. I've been living stress-free and enjoying each day. The steady increase in my bank account, now that I'm no longer burdened with saving, brings me great joy. My enthusiasm for work has returned. Previously, my earnings were drained by gifts for my in-laws, which was disheartening, but that's no longer an issue. I've also been able to give my parents the gifts I truly wanted to, something I couldn't afford before. They initially said that what they had received was enough, but once I explained it was for my personal satisfaction, they happily accepted. Seeing their reaction lifted the guilt I had felt. As for love, I plan to take a break, but if the opportunity for remarriage arises, I hope to apply the lessons I've learned from these experiences.